It's WFUV and WFUV HD, New York. Listener supported public media from Fordham, the Jesuit University of New York. Right here on 90.7 FM, WFUV.org, and WFUVSports.org. This is One on One, New York's longest running sports call-in show on 90.7 FM, WFUV.org, and WFUVSports.org.
Welcome in to One on One, New York's longest running sports call-in show. Hope you're all doing well on this Saturday morning, January 8th, 2022. And this should be a great show. Got a lot of great stuff to talk about. I mean, it's just going to be a great one. One-on-one. Can't get enough. Glad you're here with us this morning. We're live on YouTube from 11 a.m. to 2 p.m. And then we'll be on 90.7 later tonight from 11 p.m. to 2 a.m. And I am pleased to be joined right now by Danny Scott. I'm Brian Rabacs. I'm joined by Danny Scott. Danny, how are you this morning?
You know, I'm doing good. I'm out here on the West Coast. It's a little bit earlier for me. I'm so glad to be here. Couldn't be more excited to get rolling into stuff. There's so much going on in the world of sports right now. The NFL playoff picture is heating up. NBA All-Star is coming soon. And there's even a little bit of baseball stuff to talk about that I can't wait to get into later.
First of all, if you're watching this right now, please give a huge hand to Danny Scott. I mean, it's real bright and early over there on the West Coast. So this guy's working hard and just ready to go right away.
Yeah, you got to do what you got to do. So I'm glad to be here. It's absolutely worth waking up a little bit earlier than I normally would on a Saturday. This is about the time I'll be up for work most days out of the week. So it's not that big of a deal, but I could not be more excited to be here this morning.
Of course, because it's one-on-one, and it couldn't be more exciting. Brian Rabacs, Danny Scott with you. Gokul Perugu will be on us for a couple of segments later, and he'll have some headlines for us too. So we'll be looking forward to that. But as I mentioned before, we just have a lot to dive into. This is a fun time because, you know, our opening segment will be all about the NFL and all the NFL playoffs, you know, week 18, first week 18 ever. So that's kind of cool. And also there's a lot of playoff scenarios that still kind of need to develop. There are a couple divisions up for grabs. Danny Scott's a big Niners guy. They have not locked up a playoff spot yet. There's still some NFC seeding still left to be decided. And there's also a couple spots in the AFC up for grabs. So I'm looking forward to talking about that. And I'm looking forward to tomorrow's games as well.
Yeah, I mean, the Niners need to lock up a spot for sure. And they can do that with a win this weekend. We'll definitely dive deeper into that. But like you mentioned, the first week 18 in NFL history, there's a potential for a lot of different stuff to happen. No position is really locked up besides that Packers 1 seed. So I'm really excited to see what's going on. There's a lot of great games this weekend and quite a few games with a lot of meaning behind them. And, you know, going along with football, the national championship is just a couple days away. So, I mean, what gets better than this time of year?
I mean, yeah, I look forward to the national championship every single year. But I mean, this year it's just it should be a great game. It's, you know, Alabama and Georgia, 2 SEC powerhouses going at it. And it's really interesting because these two teams, they squared off about a month ago in the SEC championship game. And Alabama, I mean, they took care of business. So we thought that Georgia the whole year was such a dominant force in, you know, college football, but Alabama kind of knocked them off their high horse a little bit. So now it's interesting, you know, is Georgia as good as we think they are? Is Alabama that good? There's a lot at play here, and I'm looking forward to the game on Monday night for sure.
Couldn't agree with you more. I mean, there's just so much stuff that's going on in this game. There's so much to unpack. It's really tough to beat a team 2 times in one season. So I'm not exactly sure where I know this game is going to go. But I do know that it is going to be an absolute thriller of a game. There's a lot of NFL talent that's playing in this game. It is the 2 best teams in college football from this year that are going to be showing down. I'm on WFUV's college football podcast, College Gridiron. Go give that a listen if you're really into college football. But we had a podcast earlier this year titled Alabama, Georgia, and Everybody Else. And it comes full circle, and it is Alabama, it is Georgia, and it is everybody else.
Yeah, Alabama and Georgia, the two top teams in college football. Hopefully it's a great game. I mean, it would really just stink if we had a game like last year where Alabama just blows them out. But, Alabama and Georgia, I'm very confident in Georgia to keep up with them. And, Danny and I will give our predictions on the game later on in the show. Also got a couple of interviews today as well. We're talking college football. We talked to Nick Carparelli, the executive director of bowl season. And we also talked to PBR bull rider Cooper Davis. That was a really interesting conversation. He was at Madison Square Garden last night and will be there tonight as well. So we had a couple of interesting conversations, and we'll be talking some basketball as well. Kyrie Irving's back for the Nets, but the Nets, they still struggle. And the Knicks, they had a huge win on Thursday, but there's still controversy. There's always something negative to talk about. And Julius Randle giving the thumbs down, that should be interesting to dive into. It's definitely something worth talking about. And, what exactly do we make of this? Was it a smart move from Julius Randle? Was he right? That should be interesting to get into. And then obviously we'll have headlines to come on along the way, a lot of different news over the week. I'm sure we can probably guess a couple of the big headlines. There have been a couple of big names surrounding the sports world. Antonio Brown, that's the big one. I'm looking forward to diving into that. There's just so much to dissect there. That's a situation that just keeps developing as it keeps getting more complicated, and Antonio Brown keeps saying more things. The situation, Danny, just gets more and more interesting as time goes on.
It's absolutely hilarious to me. I mean, Antonio Brown is a clown in the NFL at this point. He's one of the laughing stocks of the NFL. Him and Aaron Rodgers, I think they just can't stay out of the news. And Aaron Rodgers, I think there's probably going to be a conversation about him in a little bit with this whole MVP voting thing. All the stuff that's been surrounding him this year is absolutely hilarious. But yeah, Antonio Brown, I mean, what do you even make of this? The dude has become an absolute psychopath liar. He lies about everything. It's just so funny to watch. This whole unraveling of Antonio Brown going from one of the most beloved players in the NFL to one of the laughing stocks of the NFL is pretty hilarious. And, maybe the dude has some other stuff going on that is going to affect him later down the line. But right now we are just reaping the benefits of whatever Antonio Brown decides to do.
Yeah, well, there's so much to unpack there, and we definitely will later on. And we also, at the end of the show, we're going to be talking a little bit of MLB Hall of Fame. I know there's not a lot of baseball to talk about with the lockout still in full swing. No idea when that's going to end. That's kind of concerning me a little bit as we enter January. How long is that going to prolong? But soon, baseball is going to have the Hall of Fame voting. And, he's going to bring up the debate of, there are a lot of guys that are on the ballot for the last year of eligibility. Most notably Barry Bonds and Curt Schilling, Roger Clemens, Sammy Sosa. Those guys are on for the last time. And, if they don't get 75% of the vote, they're off the ballot. And then there are also some interesting first timers as well, most notably David Ortiz and Alex Rodriguez. So Danny and I will be giving our votes per se and giving who should get in, who shouldn't. Danny, just talking about the show, I'm just excited to get into it. I mean, I assume you are as well.
Absolutely. I mean, what's not to be excited about? There is so much going on right now. And anytime you get to talk MLB in January, it's awesome. And we get to talk about some of the greatest baseball players to ever play the game. But yeah, NFL's in full swing. NBA is starting to heat up. College football national championship. We're approaching NFL playoffs and Super Bowl. March Madness is just a couple months away. This is the best time of the year for sports, and I cannot wait to talk about it.
Oh, yeah, you heard it from Danny. There's so much to look forward to. And we have a great show coming up. We're going to take a short break right now, but after the break, we're just going to dive right into it. NFL playoffs. Gokul Perugu will be on for that segment. He'll be with us. We'll all be hashing out, the NFL playoff scenarios, who's getting in, what games we're looking forward to. That's all coming up after the break. You don't want to miss it. Stay tuned. We'll be back after the break here on One on One.
everyone, I'm Kayla Wenzel, reminding you to follow WFUV Sports on all your social media platforms. Check out our Twitter or Instagram by searching at WFUV Sports. This way you can follow along with our New York beat reporters in and post-game reports. You can also find highlights from today's basketball game and even links for our one-on-one broadcasts. Our social media keeps you up to date with all WFUV coverage, so make sure you give us a follow so that you never miss an update.
All right. So after a short breather, we're back here on one-on-one. Brian Rabacs, Daniel Scott, and right now we're joined by Gokul Perugu. He'll be with us with the show. He'll be giving headlines, and he'll be talking with us as well. Gokul, hello, welcome to one-on-one.
Hey guys, I hope you're doing well today morning. And yeah, I'm really excited to really dig into. I guess this is the first time the NFL has had 17 games this season. So I'm really excited to really just dig in and see what the playoffs will be looking like.
Yeah, it's a first. I mean, the NFL has never had an 18th week. It's weird almost. It's January 8th and, the NFL regular season's still going on. But, that's the new reality we live in, the first year of 17 games. But as always, last week of the season, there's a lot of interesting playoff games coming up. And there's a lot of great ones. First of all, we have two games today. The Chiefs play the Broncos at 4:30 today. That game really only matters. The Chiefs have locked up the AFC West and the Broncos are eliminated. So that game only really matters with, the Chiefs having a shot at the 1 seed in the AFC. And, if they can only achieve that if they win today, then they need some help tomorrow. But they have to win today, get the 1 seed. And then the Cowboys and the Eagles, that's the big game tonight at 8:15. It's a big division rivalry, but both those teams have locked up playoff spots. Cowboys obviously have the NFC East locked up. And then the Eagles, they have a wild card spot clinched. They'll have either, I believe, the 7 or the 6. But then we get into tomorrow, and tomorrow has a lot of interesting games. And, a lot of teams still fighting for those last playoff spots. The AFC and the NFC, they still have spots open. So, I mean, I guess I'll throw out a general question to Mr. Danny Scott over here. Is there a game in particular that you're looking forward to the most? What excites you the most about tomorrow's slate of games?
Yeah, I mean, obviously there's a game I'm looking forward to the most, and that is Niners versus the Rams. The Niners own the Rams the last few years. They've won 5 straight against the Rams. Kyle Shanahan and Jimmy Garoppolo are Sean McVay's daddies. They just like to beat the Rams. And I really, really need them to win tomorrow. If they win tomorrow, they got a playoff spot. And then the other game, selfishly, that I'm going to be paying close attention to is Saints Falcons, because the Rams this year are a better football team than the Niners. The Niners did beat them and kind of embarrass them on Monday Night Football. And that was an awesome game for me to watch. But if the Rams can beat the Niners need the Saints to lose. So those are the two that I'm really looking forward to. And you mentioned the Eagles versus the Cowboys. I think that is a sneaky good game. That's two playoff teams going at it. It might be a preview of a game a couple weeks away. You never know what's going to happen once teams get in the playoffs, especially those Eagles. The Eagles like to go 9-7 and win the Super Bowl. So that'll be a fun one. But those are kind of the three that I got pegged, but especially Niners Rams. That's going to be a game I'm absolutely tuned into and completely locked in.
I mean, yeah, Cowboys, Eagles, that's usually a game a lot of people look forward to. But, I mean, Philly, they're not the realest of playoff teams. I don't think. I know there are some people who will disagree, but, I mean, first of all, congrats to them. They made the playoffs. I know. I don't know if you can see the background. I have a couple of New York Giants fat heads on my wall, so that kind of upsets me. But the Eagles, they're surprisingly in the playoffs, and they actually don't really have anything to play for this weekend. They locked up a playoff spot last week, so this game is really about carrying momentum into the playoffs. And they face the Dallas Cowboys. If they can win this game, I don't know exactly if the Cowboys are resting anybody because they are still playing for seeding, whether they get the 4 or the 3 or the 2. I think that still remains to be seen. But the Eagles is an interesting one, and I'll throw it over to Gokul here. I mean, the Eagles, they're stuck into the playoffs. So now with this last game coming up before the playoffs, I mean, Gokul, what are you expecting here out of the Philadelphia Eagles and Jalen Hurts?
I mean, I'm going to speak. Obviously, I'll be a little biased when I speak. I am an Eagles fan, so I'll definitely be glued to today's game. And as you said, I would say I'm an objective Eagles fan, at least in certain regards. And yes, they aren't really one of those playoff teams that a lot of people are really expecting to make a deep run. But I honestly think this can really just be a statement game because let's be honest, the last year when Carson Wentz was playing and before he got traded, many experts and critiques and fans were thinking the Eagles would be a lot worse this year. But I was really happy to just see that they were able to make the playoffs, which just shows how how bright of a future they have. Because I think you've seen the stats where I think it was like Lamar Jackson's first, I think it was like 12 or 14 starts versus Jalen Hurts' first 12 or 14 starts. They're relatively similar in statistics. And I really think that just shows that the Eagles really have a bright future in Jalen Hurts. And obviously the connection that Jalen Hurts and Devontae Smith have, I mean, you've clearly seen it over the season. And I think Jalen Hurts can become a much, much better pocket passer. And we all know his ability in terms of when it comes to rushing. And I just really think this can be a solid statement game. And if they were to come out with a win, I think it would just be, like you said, it would create great momentum going into the playoffs.
Yeah, we mentioned that Cowboys-Eagles game tonight. Eagles maybe can sneak a win. Who knows? But that doesn't really alter too much in the playoff picture. In terms of the Chiefs-Broncos game, I think we're going to be very quick with this and just say, are we all in agreement that the Chiefs are going to, win this game? Assuming, they obviously, they're obviously much better, and they have something to play for, and they're not going to lose a must-win game against the Denver Broncos and Drew Lock. So I think so. We're in agreement there with the Chiefs, but now we move into the Sunday games, and this is where things get really interesting because there are a lot of games to be played where the playoff picture it can shake up a little bit. There are a couple of teams that maybe haven't really been in your heads, but they're still in it. So I'm going to start with an interesting one where two teams are not in the playoff picture right now, but they're both not eliminated, and it's the Steelers and the Ravens. And this is some game because obviously we know the rivalry between these two franchises, but obviously with a playoff spot on the line, this is a huge game. The Ravens, again, without Lamar Jackson, it'll be Tyler Huntley as the Ravens look to break a 5-game losing streak and get that last playoff spot in the AFC. So with the Steelers and the Ravens, they obviously both need some help getting into the playoffs, but it's an interesting game. It's a must-win game for both teams. So, Danny, I'm going to start with you. Steelers, Ravens. Do you have a pick in this one? What do you think is going to happen here? Who are you taking?
So I've been back and forth on both of these teams all year. I've been all in on them and I've been all out on them at multiple different points this year. I will say I think I'm going to pick the Steelers. I think they have a better roster. They're more They got more talent, especially in the wide receiving core. They have their quarterback that's played all year in Ben Roethlisberger. Whether you think Ben Roethlisberger is a good quarterback at this stage in his career is a completely different question and a different argument to be had. However, he has been playing all year, and he's played competent enough to keep them in playoff contention all year. with no Lamar Jackson. They don't have a ton of star power at the other skill positions outside of Mark Andrews. They haven't had a running back really stay consistent all year. And Hollywood Brown is kind of their only receiver to really look to at this point in time. So I'm going to pick the Steelers in this one. I think they have a lot more talent between Najee Harris, Deontay Johnson, and Freiermuth has come out of nowhere this year, a rookie tight end, and played very well. I think there's an argument to be had that he's going to be one of the top 10 tight ends in the league next year. So I think I'm picking the Steelers. However, there was one game that I forgot to mention. Well, I'm sure you're going to wrap around to this. I just want to say it real quick. The playoff game essentially is the Chargers versus the Raiders. It's win and you're in for that one. We'll get into that one in a few minutes. I just can't believe I forgot to bring that one up.
Well, yeah, that's a huge one. I mean, that's a Sunday night game, and that's what everyone's looking forward to. Assuming some things go right, that should be a win and you're in for both those teams. But we'll get to that later. We're focusing on the Steelers and the Ravens, and we'll turn it over to Gokul right now. What are you looking at in the Steelers-Ravens game? This is a huge game for both teams, but who do you think is coming out on top?
I mean, I think, like Danny said, I think the Steelers do have a better shot. I mean, TJ Watt will be hungry, and we'll obviously get into that later because he will be looking to break the single season sack record. So he's definitely going to be hungry to, really get to the quarterback. And I think really, and obviously given that this will be Big Ben's last game, I think the sentiment will really fuel the team to really, play their best and win their final game. But I think the one thing that needs to be pointed out is obviously given that just how tight the AFC playoff race is, there's just a lot of things that need to sort of go for the Ravens and or Steelers for them to win. And I have it pulled up right in front of me. And I think the Steelers clinch a playoff spot with a win and the Colts losing. And the thing is, and obviously I think we'll talk about this later, but the thing is the Colts are going against the Jacksonville Jaguars. So I think when you really look at things, I think most people will, I don't think they're expecting Indianapolis to lose against Jacksonville. So I honestly think, obviously for the Steelers, they're going to try their best. But in the end, because I'm pretty sure the Steelers and Ravens, their playoff spot is contingent upon the Colts losing. So, I mean, at this point, realistically, I think at this point, they just play. They try their best, they play their best, and just see how things go. Because I know there are playoff implications, but when you look at it objectively, the chances of the Colts losing to the Jacksonville Jaguars is relatively low.
Well, I mean, you say that, but the interesting thing about the Colts being on the road in Jacksonville, the Colts, I don't know if you know, but they have not won in Jacksonville since 2014, which is crazy. It really, it makes your head turn a little bit. But they have not beaten the Jaguars in Jacksonville since 2014. And there have been some bad Jaguars teams in, the last 5 years or so. So that's a pretty surprising stat. The Jaguars went 1-15 last year. Who was their one win against? It was the Colts in Jacksonville week 1. So I'm not saying it's a guarantee. I mean, obviously the Colts are favored, but anything can happen, you guys.
Absolutely. I agree. And also the Bills this year lost to the Jags, and the Bills are one of the scariest teams in the AFC. Anything can happen in football, and that's why the games are played. But I would not say that this Jacksonville team is a guaranteed win for the Colts.
Yeah, I wouldn't say so either. But I mean, speaking, objectively and like looking at this with the context of what's gone on in this season, I think the Colts are very good. So we're going to transition to this game here. Obviously, it looks like a lopsided affair on paper, and the Colts are obviously a much better team than the Jaguars. The Jaguars have been the biggest embarrassment in the entire league, with all the drama they've been going through with, Urban Meyer and everything, pretty much all Urban Meyer. And then obviously, Trevor Lawrence has struggled the whole year, a really disappointing rookie season for him, but they have a chance to play spoiler on the last week of the season. But for me, I think I can't not take the Colts here. I mean, this is a good Colts team, and you really have to win this game. So when you put this in front of them that you have to beat the Jacksonville Jaguars to get into the playoffs because, I mean, realistically, I'm looking at the NFL on their Instagram posted a lot of like scenarios, whether, how teams can get into the playoffs. And the Colts, it's really difficult for them to get in with a loss. They're going to need a lot of help. They need ties to happen. I think they need like the Ravens and the Steelers to tie for them to get in. And that's obviously not what you're hoping for. So you have to win. So I think with a must-win game, I think Carson Wentz and Jonathan Taylor are going to get the job done. I'm taking Indianapolis. And, I'll start with you, Danny, and then Gokul, you can give your thoughts after. But Danny, who are you taking, Colts, Jags?
Boy, would I love to say I hope the Jags beat them. But it's so hard to bet against a much better team in the Colts. I think I'm going to completely agree with you. Go with the Colts. Carson Wentz, despite his struggles throughout the year and at points in his career, is still a very good quarterback. I would label him as a good NFL quarterback. Not a great, but a good. And Jonathan Taylor is a full-fledged MVP candidate at this point this year. So I think it's very, very hard to bet against the Colts. Despite their struggles with Jacksonville in recent history.
And yeah, no, I totally agree with Danny. Well, I mean, I think the Colts obviously have a much stronger roster, and you also have to take into fact that the Jaguars, who even is their coach? I don't even know who they replaced Urban Meyers with. And I mean, clearly that lack of experience or, essentially that should suit or equip the Indianapolis Colts for a relatively easy win.
Well, I mean, we've been talking AFC wildcard picture, so why don't we just move to the big game? I know it's a Sunday night game, but it rounds up the AFC wildcard picture. It's the Raiders and the Chargers on Sunday Night Football. And I mean, if you talk about needing the Colts to win, I think the NFL is really rooting for the Colts to win because, I mean, if the Colts win, this is absolutely you have to win and you get into the playoffs. I don't know if you guys saw this, but the funniest thing about this game is that if the Colts lose, they lose to the Jaguars, the Chargers and Raiders could both get in with a tie. So realistically, what real incentive do they have to win the game? I mean, that would be a wild scenario, and I don't think it would happen. Even if the Colts lose, I assume we'd get a game. But I mean, it's just funny to imagine, Danny, the idea of both these teams just kneeling it out, just dying for a playoff spot. I mean, that would be a wild circumstance if it happened, but I don't think we're going down that route. And we're going to get a full-fledged Colts Chargers Raiders Sunday Night Football game. Win and you're in. These are both AFC West rivals, and I think both of these teams are good. So it's really intriguing if you set up a Colts win. This is a win and you're in. So pretty much just straightforward. Danny and Gokul, will start with Danny. Who's in?
Could you imagine how funny that would be if the Raiders and Chargers just decided, you know what, the Colts lost today, let's have 3 AFC West teams in the playoffs? I would cry laughing if they kick off the ball and it's just 50,000 kneels. I would laugh so hard. But I'm gonna go with the Chargers in this one. But before I give my reasoning, I just want to say props to the Raiders this year. With all the off the field issues and everything they had, obviously everyone knows the John Gruden saga. Everyone knows the Henry Ruggs car accident and all that stuff. And then Damon Arnett, who was one of their starting quarterbacks, get cut after an absolutely wild social media experience. That was kind of absurd. But no, I'm going to go with the Chargers. I think just the stability that they've had this year. You got Justin Herbert. You've had a coach there the whole time. The roster is very good, much better than the Raiders. They've underperformed a little bit this year. However, I think they're a much better football team. But I do want to give props to the Raiders for what they've been able to accomplish and how they've been able to stay relevant despite everything that has gone wrong down in Las Vegas.
Yeah, no, I agree with Danny. And I think Brandon Staley, he did a great job turning around this team. They picked up a lot of crucial pieces, like really, really augmenting that offensive line with Corey Linsley. And I think, Justin Herbert, he's an electrifying talent. And I do agree. I mean, I honestly think they underperformed a lot just given their sheer talent. And you just saw what Herbert did in terms of just like how he's performed as a quarterback. I think he's thrown for almost more than 35. He's thrown for over 35 touchdowns, which is just insane for a second-year quarterback. And I think he's like second in QBR this season. And obviously, given their record, he's there's obviously many more suitable MVP candidates. But I honestly think that, given the Raiders, just the the bad luck that they went through this year and just the numerous controversies they had to go through, they really aren't, really in I would say much of a position to really beat a more established team like the Chargers. And obviously the Chargers are going to be much more, they're going to be a lot hungrier to really get the win because they're an excellent team. And I think they can be one of those dark horse playoff teams that can make a deep run.
I'm going to take the Chargers too. I mean, the Raiders, obviously credit to them. And I've actually been picking against the Raiders a lot recently because it looked like for a brief moment they were just collapsing before our very eyes. I mean, I thought that game against Kansas City, it was just like, okay, these guys are finished. But, last week of the season, they're still in. But I'm going to take LA. I think, Justin Herbert's a baller. He is so good. And I just think he's got to get his team to the playoffs. So I believe, with those picks, I think we're all set on, Colts, Chargers taking those last two spots in the AFC. Correct me if I'm wrong, anybody, but I think we're all set with
yeah, I'll get there. No objections. I think those are the two best teams that have not locked up a playoff spot.
Yeah. Yep. So we'll move into more of a conflict of interest here. NFC wildcard. It's a big day for the 49ers. The New Orleans Saints are still in play despite some of the struggles the Saints have dealt with. The Saints, they're still in contention for that wildcard spot. And for the 49ers, they play the Rams tomorrow, and they have to they have to get into the playoffs with either a win guarantees the spot, or if you lose, a Saints loss to the Falcons would get them in as well. And with the Saints, they have to win and the Niners have to lose to get into the playoffs. Otherwise, there's no path there. The Rams, they're a great team, but we've mentioned earlier, the 49ers, they've had their number in recent years. So, Danny Scott, 49ers fan, what are you feeling tomorrow? First of all, what's your head at right now before the biggest game of the season tomorrow? And what can you give us? Are the Niners getting a playoff spot tomorrow?
The one thing I will say is, boy, I wish I was in the Colts position and playing the Jags this weekend. Drawing the Rams, the final game of the year, to lock up a playoff spot is kind of a tough role, man. I'm not going to lie. But for sure, I think the Niners, they're in a good spot right now. They have turned it on down the stretch outside of that loss to the Titans. That was a bad loss. They needed to win that one, especially with how hot they started in that game. But no, the Niners have the Rams numbers in recent years. I don't know. This is one of the games where I'm going, I have no idea who's going to win this game. It's in LA. The Rams are probably going to be fired up. They're in contention for a playoff, trying to get that 2 seed so that they'll play a lower seed once the playoffs actually start. But it's a very tough situation if you're a Niners player or a Niners fan, because it's just, there's so many questions that are going to be left unanswered no matter what happens. And the Saints-Falcons scares me because the Falcons, whenever they play any team that's actually competent at football, they just get demolished. And it scares me as a Niners fan. There's a lot that can go right this weekend, and there's a lot that can go wrong.
And yeah, I think that's a great way to transition when you say there's a lot that can go right and a lot that can go wrong. And I think that really just describes the Rams team, because I'll be honest with you, I have been closely following the Rams this season because I've been very, very high on Matthew Stafford, and I was really hoping for him to win the MVP. But like you just said, with Matthew Stafford, I think it's just really inconsistencies is really his like main fault, because I don't know if you know this, but I think he does lead the league in pick sixes. And given that inconsistency, because the Rams are sort of one of those teams where they just have to sort of get into the flow of the game. And I don't know if you guys saw this, but last week there was sort of like a on-field argument between Jalen Ramsey and another defender. And there were some, issues or friction going on between that team. So I think it is one of those teams where if they really get the flow going and they really get a rhythm going, I think they're unstoppable. But like Danny just said, the 49ers have a great track record against the Rams. But in my opinion, I think the Rams have a lot more to lose, just given the kind of acquisitions they made this past season with Matthew Stafford, Von Miller, OBJ. I think there's just so much on the table for them. I think they're going to definitely have to change up the game plan and really, really play a strong first half, because you guys have probably heard the stat with Sean McVay when he has a lead going into the first half. I think he's only had one loss. He's like 35 or 36-1. It's crazy. So I really think it's all about the 49ers finding a rhythm and their defense really just, keeping things together, because we all know the 49ers have a ton of strong talent. And I think it's their game to win. It's their game to win.
So I'm going to take the Niners to lose tomorrow. I think they're going to lose, but the catch is I think the Saints are going to lose to the Falcons. So the 49ers will get that playoff spot.
I'll accept that. I'll accept that. I don't like it, but I'll accept it.
I'll give you that. I think you're sleeping on the Falcons a little too much, and I think you're giving the Saints a little too much credit as a competent team. The Saints are just they're not good.
There's a lot of stuff that's going down, especially after Drew Brees is gone and Jameis Winston gets hurt. But no, the funny thing with the Saints or the Falcons, excuse me, is whenever they play a playoff team or a team that's in contention for the playoffs, they lose. And it's been like that the last 3 years. So that's the only thing that scares me a little bit.
Oh yeah, that is what they do. But I think the 49ers will end up being the team that grabs that last playoff spot, despite even if they lose. I think I'm going to take a gamble and say the Falcons are going to beat the Saints. So that's just my take. And then just really quickly from both of you, two divisions are up for grabs too. The AFC East between the Bills and the Patriots, and then the NFC West, the Rams still have to lock that up over the Arizona Cardinals. So just real quickly from both of you, Danny, I'm going to start with you. You want to give your opinions on both those respective divisions? Who's walking away tomorrow with the division title?
Yeah, I'll just keep it short and simple. The Bills and the Rams are going to lock it up. They're the two better teams. The Patriots, with Mac Jones being so young, and the Cardinals have really kind of fell off this year. They play the Seahawks. I think the Seahawks have a little bit to play for. They want to prove to everyone. So I think that the Seahawks are actually going to beat the Cardinals tomorrow. So I think the Rams lock up the NFC West, and I think the Bills lock up the AFC East.
Yeah, no, I totally agree with Danny. I think the Rams will lock up the NFC West, because obviously the Cardinals, I think it's been their common pattern. They come out of the gates extremely strong, looking like they're going to be a Super Bowl contender, but then they just stagnate and stutter and lose a ton of games like they did against the Lions. And yeah, the Buffalo Bills, I think they're just a much stronger team, much better quarterback, and I think they're really looking to make a stronger run this year in the playoffs.
Well, listen, I think I agree with both of you. I think both of the teams are just going to win tomorrow and just lock it up. I mean, especially the Bills. The Bills have to beat the Jets to get the division title. I mean, I'm sure they're capable of that. So I think they'll lock that up. And I think the Rams are going to beat the Niners, and they'll also lock it up. But I mean, in terms of those four teams in play, if you want my take on all of them, I think they're all going to win tomorrow. But with that being said, that would leave the Bills champions of the AFC East and the Rams champions of the NFC West. So once again, tomorrow, a lot of craziness can go down, especially if some of these teams lose. We don't really know what's going to happen. I'm just excited to watch it all tomorrow. Should be a great Sunday of football, but that's going to wrap up our football segment for now. And we're going to take a short little break. Coming up after the break, Gokul will be giving us some headlines of news just around the world of sports, particularly in the NFL. So don't go anywhere. We'll be right back. You're listening to One on One.
Hey there, this is Tom Quigley, your Rangers beat reporter for WFUV Sports. Make sure to follow me on Twitter at tquigs04, that's TQUIGS04, for all the latest Blue Shirts news and in-game updates. And don't forget to follow and subscribe to WFUV Sports on Instagram, Twitter, and YouTube for my post-game recaps and for all things WFUV.
Hey guys, and there's been a lot of news around the NFL that's been stirred up, and let's start off with Antonio Brown. I think with the whole fiasco where he, straight up took off his pads, took off his shirt, and just left the field. I think there's just a ton to unpack there, and we'll definitely get into it. And another major headline has been Aaron Rodgers, and he's definitely been the topic, or has been the headlines for a lot of different things. And in this case, Aaron Rodgers, I think there was a critique MVP voter that just called him the biggest jerk in the league. And I think just recently there was some sort of rumor going around that he would potentially boycott the Super Bowl if he went there. So we'll definitely get into that. And with the coming back home with the New York Giants and, Joe Judge and the 11-minute rant he went on in response to a question a reporter asked him about whether or not the Giants fans should have faith in his team. And lastly, NFL records. I think there are a couple of NFL records that can be potentially broken this week. And I think this was sort of expected given the extended season. So we'll also dig deep into that. But let's start off with, the Antonio Brown situation. I mean, from Sunday when he left the field to now, and with all the different things that went on, with the OnlyFans model, and now with the, him obviously getting released in the middle of the week. I mean, what do you guys think of the whole situation? I mean, there's a lot that went on.
I mean, where do you start with all of this? I mean, this is obviously it's a wild story, and I'm sure we're all aware of what happened on Sunday. But since then, there have been a couple. Last Sunday we were totally caught off guard, and we're like, "What? Why is Antonio Brown doing this? This is unbelievable." But I mean, he gave us some reasoning on Monday, I believe. He sent out a whole statement with the Buccaneers forced him to play on an injury, and that he needed surgery and he wouldn't go in, and because he was hurt. And then Bruce Arians told him to get out of here, so he just left and didn't want to wear their brand on his body, so he just took his jersey off and chucked his shirt into the stands. And now recently he went on a podcast and pretty much just, I think the most egregious part of this is that he just totally bashed Tom Brady and really is just shooting himself in the foot once again in front of our eyes. I mean, when you talk about this, like, Tom Brady had his back. Like, I think with the antics that Antonio Brown pulled, Tom Brady almost had every right to be furious, but he took the route of, we all love him and we hope the best for him. And then he just comes back and he bashes Tom Brady. And he's just, saying a lot of, self-centered things. I mean, it's just the crazy quote that, they didn't ask Antonio Brown to come clean toilet bowls. They asked me to come win a Super Bowl, which, I mean, to be honest, Buccaneers, they probably could have won that Super Bowl last year without Antonio Brown. But yeah, I just think the line for me was the disrespect to Tom Brady. And I was almost taking Antonio Brown's side. I was leaning that way, but I mean, Danny, now I'm just not leaning that way. I'm not really supporting what Antonio Brown's doing right now.
I don't know if I could have said it better myself. When he came out with his statement and go, they forced me to play injured and all this stuff. But then after that, shut up, stop talking. you got America on your side. Everyone was going, oh, what is going on with the Bucks? Is there some stuff that we're not hearing down there? But at this point, Antonio Brown is a psychopathic liar. And I think it's plain and simple. There's not much more to add. The dude lies about vaccine cards. He has so many allegations that have been set his way. And I don't want to get into that because that is a completely different subject. But this dude has a history of making just absurd remarks and comments and lying. I think I don't know if there's anyone in the NFL that I would expect this to come from. It is Antonio Brown. And he proved to me this weekend and over the course of this week why he is the most insane player in the NFL. It's not insanely good. He is just insane. He is a good player and was at one time looked at as a potential Hall of Famer. But the dude is a psychopath. And I don't know if you can re-image yourself, rebuild your brand after going and bashing Tom Brady. Tom Brady at one point was the most hated player in the NFL, and I think it's probably widely agreed upon that right now Tom Brady is the most loved player in the NFL and one of the most loved players in NFL history. So to go bash Tom Brady is, like you mentioned, it's egregious. I don't know how you can do that if you're Antonio Brown.
And yeah, no, I think you guys both really said it the best. I think, first of all, just talking or just speaking out against Tom Brady, the one guy where, I mean, think about this. In the same post-game conference, Bruce Arians was just straight up just said he's no longer with the Bucks. But Tom Brady right after just said, I think we need to show him some compassion and to really go on a podcast and really speak out against a man who really vouched for you and just wanted everyone to just show him some love. I think that just really speaks a lot and just speaks tremendous volumes against his character. And even when you put that aside, I think when you look at the fact that, just that unexpected and just that, the behavior of him just leaving the field and just walking out of the stadium. And also on top of that, him bringing over someone else who later tested positive. I think you guys probably read this, where he brought over, the model and, they obviously did whatever. And later she posted that she tested positive. I think that right there, he just put his entire team in jeopardy and at risk. And given just sort of those actions, I think that just really just impugns upon his overall character and overall player profile. Because I think he said in the same podcast you guys mentioned that he wanted to further play. But I mean, at the end of the day, it's Antonio Brown. We'll see how it goes. But let's move on to Aaron Rodgers.
Actually, Gokul, before we move on, I gotta is Antonio Brown ever going to play in the NFL again? I think that's just the biggest question surrounding all of this. I gotta say no.
If I was a general manager or an owner of any of these 32 franchises, I am not touching Antonio Brown with a 10-foot pole at this point in his career. I think he's a great player. But if you look at where he's been over the course of his career, everywhere he goes, the locker room falls apart. He is an absolute locker room cancer. And I don't know why any GM or any owner or any coach or any player at this point would want him to be their teammate.
I mean, listen, to the biggest Antonio Brown supporter out there, I mean, do you really think that in these last 3 years with the Steelers, the Raiders, the Patriots, and the Buccaneers, I mean, do you really think that the coaching staff and the team environment was all the problem there? There's a commonality here, and that Antonio Brown is involved in all these scenarios. So you have to imagine that it's something. Getting Antonio Brown on your team, it comes with a price. And as good of a player he is, which he's a great player, but he brings a lot of controversy. You think the Buccaneers want to deal with all this right now? No, this is a massive distraction and just a PR nightmare. So regardless of all his talent, and he's ambitious, he wants to come back and play. I just don't think any team's going to go for this. I just don't see it happening.
Yeah, no, I totally agree with you guys. I think given the sort of injuries that the Bucs went through, they don't want to go through a PR nightmare and a liability like Antonio Brown. And it was definitely very smart of them to just, release him from his team, because I think they can handle themselves very well without him. But other than that, I totally agree with you guys. And now let's with Aaron Rodgers. I mean, you guys probably saw the news where I think I laughed when he just straight up just called him a bum. He was like, yeah, he's an absolute bum for calling me a jerk. And I did see his point there where he pretty much said, if you wanted to give an award to the NFL most valuable vaccinated player, then sure, go ahead. But at the end of the day, he says he has never spoken to me in my life, and he shouldn't vouch for my character. So, I totally think, Aaron Rodgers responded to that in the right way. I mean, maybe the bum wasn't absolutely necessary, but hey, oh well. I mean, it doesn't matter really. It's Aaron Rodgers. But other than that, I think the other news that sort of there's a rumor that was generated that Aaron Rodgers would potentially boycott the Super Bowl because of the NFL COVID vaccine rules, which I just think was just straight up just nonsense. I think that would never happen. I mean, what do you guys think?
Well, I'll start with the whole MVP voting nonsense, and that I think you said it wasn't necessary to call him a bum. I mean, maybe it was. I mean, we'll discuss this later in our last segment with the MLB Hall of Fame voting, but I think that we need to, like, people who are in high positions voting for awards or accolades, like, why does it matter that Aaron Rodgers isn't the best guy? Like, is he a great guy? I mean, from the surface, Aaron Rodgers is right. We don't know what goes on in his everyday life, but he's, obviously the drama of the last year with the Packers is something. And then, he's not vaccinated, and he, misled the public about that. But I mean, he's Aaron Rodgers. The voting should just be about the player on the field. But this obviously doesn't surprise me, considering the writer is from Chicago. And I think he's still a little bit aggravated by the "I still own you" comments from Aaron Rodgers after that week 5 or 6 game against the Bears. But I mean, deal with it. Aaron Rodgers, he's not going anywhere. So gonna have to just deal with it. And as far as this story goes that broke yesterday, I mean, first of all, just the thought of Aaron Rodgers boycotting the Super Bowl, I mean, that would just be chaos for the NFL. But we believe it's not true, because Aaron Rodgers sent out a scathing tweet yesterday just denouncing the whole thing. But it was also really funny after, I don't know if you guys saw this, but after on Twitter, he essentially tried to find the culprit. So he was asking Jordan Love, he was like, I know you broke this news. I know you're the snitch and all that. It was actually pretty funny and entertaining. But I don't know. Personally, I kind of like to think of it as he's really mad. Either this story is totally made up or false, or he's just really mad at people within this direct circle that broke this news. I kind of like to think of it as that. Not saying that it's exactly true. I just think it's funnier to think of it that way. But I mean, Danny, I'll throw it over to you. This is a wild story, so I'm sure we'd love to hear your thoughts as well.
Yeah, going back to how funny would it be? How funny would it be if Aaron Rodgers actually decided, you know what, I'm going to boycott the Super Bowl? The dude is probably the MVP of the football or of the NFL this year. He's had the best season, in my opinion. And before I really get into it, I got to say, I have a little bias. I'm a big Aaron Rodgers fan. I have been for a while. He's a Northern California guy, just like me. Grew up a fan of the Niners, and he should be a Niner. Honestly, I mean, that was a whole fiasco with the Niners not drafting him and drafting Alex Smith. But before I get into the other stuff, I want to go on a little rant here. That the most valuable player award goes to the player who was the best player in the NFL that year and had the most value to his team. If you want to talk about the most valuable player, not the nicest guy award, they have a different award for that. It's called the Walter Payton Man of the Year, and that is a great award to win. But the MVP, most valuable player, how can you tell me that the 13-3 at this current moment, and most likely to be 14-3 Packers, Aaron Rodgers was almost 4,000 passing yards. I believe it's 35 touchdowns and 4 interceptions. How is he not the most valuable player, regardless of what he does off the field? There's something to be said, like with Antonio Brown, but Aaron Rodgers, before this past year, hasn't been making many waves in the NFL. He's a widely respected guy. He is an absolutely generational talent, and he deserves his 3rd MVP this year. He is the best player on the best team in the NFL. And going to the whole Super Bowl thing, I think there's absolutely no way that the MVP, the face of the NFL or one of the faces of the NFL would boycott the Super Bowl if they get in. All of these dudes care about, the only thing they care about is winning rings. Aaron Rodgers couldn't care less whether he won an MVP or not. He wants that Super Bowl ring to add to his legacy. If the Packers make the Super Bowl, there is absolutely no way that Aaron Rodgers sits out the Super Bowl because he wants to make some type of a statement to Roger Goodell. But like I said, the most valuable player, I don't care who you are. I don't care if you're a bad person, as long as you're not committing heinous crimes. If you're just like not widely liked, who cares? It's the most valuable. That's the key term, most valuable player.
Yeah, Dan, I totally agree with both of you guys. I think there needs to be a distinction that needs to be made with, most valuable player. It's not based on the person's image. It's primarily based on the person's talent. And you guys both made excellent points about that. And obviously, I personally thought with the whole boycotting the NFL Super Bowl, I think that's just total BS. Let's just be honest. It's just never going to happen. And really take it really seriously. If anything, I thought it was a joke. I thought it was funny with the way Aaron Rodgers responded with all those hashtags and whatever. But, at the end of the day, it's Aaron Rodgers. And I think no one can really question his ability. And I think he will be going for his 4th MVP. And he's just Aaron Rodgers. And now moving on to, the Giants. Obviously in the previous weekend in the post-game conference, Joe Judge sort of went on an 11-minute rant about why fans should still have faith in the Giants. And we do have a Giants fan now, Brian. What do you think? Do you think he'll be the coach next year? What do you think about the whole situation, the way he responded, and how the Giants should respond?
So we're cut for time here on one-on-one, but after hearing all this, I wish I could go on an 11-minute rant. What is this guy doing? That's what my immediate thought was when I saw all of this. Are you serious? The Giants, not really to the fault of Joe Judge recently, but they've been a disaster this year. They've been a total disaster. And I'll credit that more to Mike Glennon coming in and just being horrible. That's where the basis is. So he's not necessarily at fault for them being 4-12 right now. But is he the coach going forward? I don't think so. And which kills me to say, because I was so high on this guy after last year. They start off last year 1-7, but then they go 5-3 down the stretch, miraculously are in playoff contention because the NFC East was horrible. And it was a lot of fun down the stretch last year, just hoping they could get into the playoffs. So it was really exciting. And I was really high on Joe Judge. I thought the Giants got their guy. This is the right guy. And I feel like in 2021, he just got totally exposed as just not a great coach. Obviously, his press conferences could be better. I think he's really annoying to listen to at times in press conferences, but that is what it is. But just in game too, he doesn't use timeouts well at all. There were so many instances, especially earlier in the season, where he would just burn timeouts randomly. And I think the last time I was on one-on-one was before the Dolphins game, and I was still. Joe Judge was still in my good graces. I didn't really want to, write him off immediately. But, that game, I thought the Giants had so many opportunities to win. And I thought Joe Judge didn't do a great job in that game. And that's where he kind of started to lose me. And now he's going on these ridiculous rants about a bunch of nonsense. He keeps saying, okay, we're building the foundation. We're building the foundation. Guess what? This was supposed to be the year where they were supposed to contend. This was supposed to be the year they were good, and none of that has happened. But he's talking about stuff that doesn't even matter, because the big important thing is the product on the field. So why do I care that people are coming to your office twice a day, begging you to come back to the Giants? Why do I care that people call you on other teams twice a week, wishing they could have stayed with the Giants? Who cares? And also, how much truth is there to any of that? Do you really think that, I don't know, Dalvin Tomlinson, the only names that come to mind are Dalvin Tomlinson and Kevin Zeitler, who left the Giants. and they're on the Minnesota Vikings and the Baltimore Ravens. I mean, do you think any of them are like begging to come back to the 4-12 Giants? I don't think so. I mean, this is just ridiculous, and he's just shooting himself in the foot right in front of our eyes. It's crazy. And I'll let you guys jump in and give your thoughts on Joe Judge, but I mean, this is just unbelievable. Joe Judge is 10-22 in 2 seasons with the Giants, and he's just imploding right before our eyes. And the more ridiculous thing is that John Mara says like he's found the next Bill Parcells in Joe Judge. Like you see, like it's ridiculous. But now there are recent reports that he might not come back, which is odd, which might explain the rant of him essentially just like begging John Mara to keep him as the head coach. So I mean, that's all my take on it. And I'd love to get your guys' thoughts on it too. Danny, I would love to hear what you have to say, but I think Joe Judge I've seen all I need to see of Joe Judge as head coach of the Giants.
I mean, you can keep going for the rest of the segment. We'll just let you go. That was fun. No, I agree. I agree with you. A man that has a secure job does not have a need to go on a 11-minute rant why this team is building a foundation, why this team is not a clown show. We don't have guys fighting on the sidelines. Who cares if you got guys fighting on the sidelines? Like you said, there's been Super Bowl winning teams that guys fight on the sidelines. Peyton Manning and Jeff Saturday. It was a playoff game. Peyton Manning comes over screaming at Jeff Saturday. That team won a couple Super Bowls. You think they cared whether guys were fighting on the sidelines? No one cares at all. Win. It's as simple as that, especially in the New York City market. All you got to do is win, and you will be absolutely loved. I think it starts at the top, though. I think John Mara, as the president, needs to, honestly, I saw this on a talk show. I forget exactly who it was. He needs to fire himself. He needs to bring in an actual president, get out of the football stuff. Since he's taken over, yes, they won 2 Super Bowls, but they already had Tom Coughlin, who was in place when he got hired. And then he went and fired Tom Coughlin, who won 2 Super Bowls. I don't know how you do that. Tom Coughlin was there for 11 years. They've already gone through 4 coaches and half the time that Tom Coughlin was the coach of the Giants. And then after you fire yourself, you find a good president, then you fire Dave Gettleman, because Dave Gettleman is a clown. He does not know what he's doing. You need to get him out of there. You need to bring in a good GM. Find someone. The Niners brought in John Lynch, and you've seen what they've done. Then after that, find a coach that works well with the GM. Find a coach that the GM and coach can build this team together. Find players that you want this team that's going to work for the coach. And then after that, you get rid of Daniel Jones. Daniel Jones is a decent quarterback. He's not a good quarterback. He is not a great quarterback. He's not going to be a quarterback that's going to win you a Super Bowl. And at this point in his career, I think it's fairly clear and obvious to me that he's not going to be the guy that's going to get you to the promised land. I think it's time to move on from Daniel Jones. I think next year is going to be another rough year for the Giants, but I think you can really, really, really kick off this rebuild. You're going to have 2 top 10 picks this year. I think you need to lose this week, and you need to find a way to lose, and you need to hope that the Vikings beat the Bears.
Find a way to lose. I don't think
find a way to lose.
I don't think they should have any trouble doing that.
That's a good point. No, but you're gonna have 2 top 10 picks. One of them is going to be top 5. You trade Daniel Jones, maybe pick up a 4th rounder or something. Trade him to a team that needs a backup quarterback, or maybe you package a 2nd rounder in Daniel Jones and trade him for another 1st round pick. I have no idea what your move is, but it's time to really kick off this rebuild. They're in salary cap purgatory right now. It's bad in New York. They need to figure it out. Start off the rebuild, start trading some players, be bad for another couple years. But this team really, I feel like they're just right around the corner with all these draft picks. They're starting to build up that offensive line. Use these 2 picks this year on offensive linemen in the 1st round. And then there's not really, in my opinion, there's not a great quarterback in this draft that's going to be a generational talent. None of these 4 to 5 1st round projected quarterbacks this year would be a 1st rounder last year. So I think you trade Daniel Jones, you find a guy that can be a replacement guy for 1 year. Maybe you just absolutely tank next year, go for the number 1 pick in the draft and draft a guy like Bryce Young.
Yeah, I mean, both of you guys had excellent points. I mean, I think looking at it, the first thing I was going to say was, yeah, as a professional judge should not be worrying about fights on other teams' sidelines. I think you should first worry about your own team, and I totally agree. I think there's a lot of things you guys, mentioned, and I think to add to that, they definitely do need a new president, a GM, and a new GM and coach that works well together to really deal with a lot of things. Because let's keep in mind that they signed Kenny Galladay for a massive contract. And I mean, what did he do this season? Like, he had 0 touchdowns. He didn't really do that well. And given the $72 million contract they gave him, and on top of that, they also have Saquon to deal with, because now it's really going to be a gamble, because with Saquon, he's very injury prone. But then there's also the argument that can be said about their just terrible offensive linemen that basically gave him no help. And there's just so much, there's just a lot of murky waters that needs to be navigated. And I mean, let's be honest, I think both of you guys said it the best. I think they really just need a solid GM and coach to really navigate through that and be able to effectively draft the right players, whether it be, defensive players or offensive players. And, we're obviously almost, the time is running out for the segment. So right before we end, I think I said this before, but there are a couple of NFL records that can be potentially broken this week. And the first being Cooper Kupp, who has had an absolutely electrifying season. He's established himself as one of the league's premier wide receivers. He has, I think he has 1,800 he pretty much has over 1,800 yards and 138 catches. He needs 12 catches and 136 more receiving yards to break Calvin Johnson and Michael Thomas's record. And we obviously have TJ Watt, who's been having an absolute monster season. So I just wanted to sort of throw it out to you guys. Do you think Cooper Kupp and TJ Watt will break the record? And sorry, just one more thing. TJ Watt needs, I think, a sack and a half to break the record. And what do you guys think? Do you think they'll break the records? Do you think they won't?
I think TJ Watt will. I think TJ Watt can certainly do it. But I mean, I think Cooper Kupp, what'd you say he needed? Like 12 catches?
12 catches and 136 receiving yards to break the records.
I mean, look, normally I would say absolutely not. Like, that's a ridiculous game, but that's what somehow Cooper Kupp's been doing all year. So I guess if you're going to put me on the spot, I'm going to say no, he'll get like 10 catches for whatever. I just want like Megatron's record to stand, because the difference between Cooper Kupp and TJ Watt is Cooper Kupp's going to be playing in his 17th game, which is like, this is the whole debate topic around NFL records. No, it's unfair. Yeah. All these records are now going to be broken because they have the extra game. And Cooper Kupp is well in line to break multiple records by the 17th game. But I mean, TJ Watt's different because TJ Watt's missed a couple of games, I believe. I believe he's played like 14 or 15.
Yeah, I think he's missed 2 full games, and he hasn't played a couple of games like completely because of an injury.
So if he breaks a sack record, that's not like cheating the system. You're playing 15 games and breaking the sack record. You're playing less than a full season. So that should be looked at as more of an accomplishment. But yeah, I think that these records are both in jeopardy, and I think TJ Watt's going to do it. Cooper Kupp's got a little bit more of a taller task, but the records are both in jeopardy tomorrow, and it'll be interesting to see. That's another thing to look forward to tomorrow.
Yeah, I agree. I think TJ Watt has a much greater chance than Cooper Kupp, considering that the Niners own the Rams. So I think Cooper Kupp's going to get shut down. Cooper Kupp had a great year. But I agree with you, Brian. I think TJ Watt is a much bigger deal, considering he missed a couple games. He's only a sack and a half away, and he's an electrifying player. He's the DPOY this year. I think he definitely has the chance to do it, especially with a Ravens team, and he's going to be fired up because they're playing for a playoff spot. He's going for the sack record. He's going to have an electrifying game, and I could see him even getting a couple more than he needs. I could see him getting, a 3-4 sack game tomorrow. Cooper Kupp, 12 receptions in an NFL game is a lot, and I could see 136 yards. I don't think that's completely out of the question. I do think 12 receptions is a good chunk that's going to be tough to pass up. We just saw it last weekend in the Rose Bowl. I mean, Jackson Smith and Jigba, he got 15 receptions, but those 15 receptions also led to 300 something yards. So 12 receptions, if he can get to 12 receptions, he's going to have a 200-yard receiving game.
Yeah, I mean, I agree with you. I mean, I hope that Cooper Cup breaks the record, because honestly, that'd be a great experience to watch. And TJ Watt, I think he'll also break the record. And I mean, let's be honest. I mean, I think against the Ravens, he's had, in the 9 games he's played against the Ravens, he's had 9 sacks. So I think he's primed to just have another monster game. And with Cooper Cup, like, I think another statistic that was mentioned was, I think against his career, is the career matchup against the 49ers, I think he's averaged only 40 yards a game. And I think Sean McVay said that he's definitely the focal point of the offense, but we won't force feed him the ball, for him to obviously break the record. So I think that'll certainly be an interesting game to watch. And I'll definitely be keeping my eyes on the Steelers game and to see whether or not they can break the record.
Yeah, I mean, the last thing I'll say about Cooper Kupp is, I mean, it's obviously 12 receptions, 136 yards is a huge game, but I mean, that sounds like such a Cooper Kupp game to have, given the amount of times he's fed the ball and just the crazy season he's had. So it's both records. They can certainly be broken tomorrow, but that will remain to be seen. Gokul, thanks so much for these headlines. Lots to get into. That was a fun segment. That was a lot of fun diving into everything. So we'll take a short break right now. But coming up next on 101, myself, and Daniel Scott, we got to talk with Cooper Davis. Cooper Davis, PBR bull rider, spent the time talking with us. We had a great conversation with him, and we'll get into it. That'll be coming up right after the break. Stay tuned. Cooper Davis coming up after the break.
WFUV and WFUV HD, New York. Listener supported public media from Fordham, the Jesuit University of New York. Right here on 90.7 FM, WFUV.org, and WFUVsports.org. New York's longest running sports call-in show on 90.7 FM, WFUV.org, and WFUVsports.org.
Back to One-on-One, New York's longest running sports call-in show. And now we're pleased to be joined by PBR bull rider Cooper Davis. Davis's PBR career began in 2012, and since then, he's won 25 events, has 38 90-point rides, and has recorded 1,529.5 points in his career, and was ranked number 3 in the world in 2021. Cooper, thanks so much for coming on the show.
You bet, man. I'm glad to be here.
So I'm going to start this off with the pretty straightforward question. I'm curious as to where your passion for bull riding came from, and when did you know exactly that you wanted to do this professionally?
Yeah, so I didn't have like a normal background in bull riding or a family that participated in bull riding events, but I watched it on TV as a little kid, and just like a lot of kids do these days, So at 5 years old, I was riding my little rocking horse, thinking I was a bull rider, and when I turned 18, I just I knew I wanted to do it professionally after I'd been on a few calves and steers, and it just my career's evolved from that.
Yeah, you mentioned that you didn't grow up in a family that bull riding was very big. How hard was it to convince your parents to let you bull ride, and how hard was it to pick up, since it kind of wasn't a family tradition of your guys's?
Convincing my family to ride bulls was the biggest hurdle I had to jump. And the way that I did that, my sister ended up marrying a guy that rode bulls professionally. And whenever I was 12 years old, I said, well, he does it, why can't I? And it was kind of hard to argue that point. So my brother-in-law is the one that really helped me, break the mold of being able to ride.
Now, watching some of your rides, it's obvious that bull riding is no joke. It's incredibly difficult and requires an immense amount of skill. So what do you do to prepare for an event, be it your training regimen or some kind of routine? What does preparation look like for you before an event?
Most bull riders, everything that we do is going to be cardio based, strong core muscles. So day-to-day basis, we're all going to be on a treadmill and basically doing ab workouts. Because if you have a strong core, it's a lot easier to transition your weight from one side to the other on the back of a bull.
You know, you won the 2016 World Championship. The next year, you were the captain of the American team in the World's competition. How important are those accomplishments to you, and what do those mean to you as a professional bull rider?
You know, the things I've been able to accomplish in my career, that's everything that I wanted to do as a kid. I guess one of the downfalls that I see as the downfalls, I did it so early in my career. So I'd always expected that to the next year to be better and better. And, you know, the first few years, I accomplished everything that I ever wanted to do. So I'm still looking for that next big thing, I guess.
We're talking with Cooper Davis here on One-on-One. And Cooper, your career, you have a very interesting story. And, you know, as we know, bull riding is a grueling sport where injuries can occur. And you broke your neck at an event at Madison Square Garden in January of 2020. And, you know, many thought your career could have been over, but sure enough, you're able to ride again by August of that year. Can you tell us a little bit of what recovery was like in your journey back?
Yeah, breaking my neck in January 2020. That was the first event of the year, and you know, that was kind of heartbreaking because that was the first time that I'd really felt like I had a chance to come back in and win another world title. And yeah, I mean, so for the next 6 months, I sit around in a neck brace and did every kind of workout that they would allow me to do. And by May, I was able to start working out pretty heavily again. And you know, when you break your neck, you have to have a strong mindset to come back. And that's what I did. You know, I just kept working towards that recovery process. And by May, I was back to getting on lower level bulls. And then August, I was back to riding the Unleash the Beast bulls again.
Yeah, so you just kind of talked about the difference in bulls. And sorry for maybe being a bit naive here with bull riding, but can you explain a little bit to people who don't know how drawing the bulls works and how you actually score points in PBR?
Yeah, so the drawing is completely done randomly. They'll do it early in the week at the PBR office. And so there's different level of events. You know, you've got kind of like the AAA event or AAA tour or whatever, which we call the Velocity. That's kind of going on in the summertime, which gives guys, you know, that maybe haven't been riding good or a chance to go and kind of pick up their confidence. So these bulls, they're not going to buck as hard. Doesn't mean they're not good bulls, but you're not going to be able to score as high. So the bulls that kick hard, spin fast, and however you control yourself on the back of that bull, that's how you get scored. Bulls like what you'll see this weekend at the Madison Square Garden, those are the best bulls in the world. And you know, it's very rare to see those bulls at a lower level event, much less these guys. I mean, it's pretty astonishing what you'll witness here this weekend.
Cooper, as a part of PBR, you've been to various places around the country. You know, we've talked about, you know, you've been to Madison Square Garden, Las Vegas, California as well, traveled all over the country. Do you have a favorite place to ride in particular?
I've got a few favorite places. Vegas has always been one of my favorites just for the simple fact it's where our finals have been held ever since I've been a part of it. I would say New York just because Madison Square Garden, the venue is so iconic. And then one that is, you know, also one of my favorites is Arlington just because it's right next to the house.
I've seen a lot of stuff with you online. You're an avid bow hunter, and you even started a YouTube channel with your son. Does the time you spend hunting kind of help you take your mind off bull riding? Or as a professional, are you always thinking about your next task in the PBR? Yeah,
I would say, you know, being able to take my son out in the outdoors and spend that time with him, that definitely takes my mind off the bull riding and the job aspect of bull riding, I guess, because you can get so wrapped up in it all year long that it's just not fun anymore. And that's why I started doing it, you know, because I took it so much as a job, it wasn't fun anymore there for a few years. And being able to take those couple months off, it really rejuvenates you and makes you love it, you know, again.
Talking with Cooper Davis here on One-on-One. And, you know, I mentioned in my last question the traveling that bull riders do, but with the travel, it's a lot of time away from home and there's a lot of sacrifices that have to be made. So do you see the immense amount of travel as a huge sacrifice that you have to make, or do you feel it's just part of the job?
It is a sacrifice, and it's especially if you have a family, you know, whenever you're young and you just want to go and have fun. I mean, yeah, I mean, that's what everybody dreams of doing. But whenever I've got a little boy at home and he's got a basketball game that I have to miss, I mean, that does suck. And I mean, but it's part of the job. I knew what I was signing up for, and they get to travel with me a lot too, and they've got to see a lot of cool things because of the PBR.
Yeah, kind of going along with the sacrifice and everything, you know, bull riding obviously is a very, very grueling and taxing sport. I've seen a lot of stuff that you said you wanted to retire by the time you're 30, and you're getting fairly close to that. What comes next for you? What comes next? Because obviously you need something to keep your mind busy or something to keep generating a little bit of income.
Yeah, so my wife and I, we've been fortunate enough to open a wedding venue. She's pretty successful in her own rights, and we've got a couple other things that we're starting as well. And I don't think my career is over with the PBR after I'm done riding. I think I'll continue to work for the PBR, and with this whole new team thing that's coming up in the future, I think that's going to create a lot of jobs for these guys that are retiring and want to continue to work with the PBR.
Cooper, I got one last question here before we let you go. We're entering the year 2022. It's a new year, another year for you in the PBR. So I got to ask, do you have any goals you wish to accomplish for this year in 2022?
Yeah, I mean, I want to win another world title. That's always at the top of the list. And then, but it starts off with one event. So if I can win New York this weekend, that's a good start to the 2020 grind.
All right. And that'll do it here. We're talking with Cooper Davis, PBR bull rider. He will be at Madison Square Garden this weekend for his event. Just can't wait to look forward to it. Cooper, thank you so much for being on One-on-One here today.
Yes, sir. Thank you guys for having me. And everybody that's listening, come out to the PBR Monster interview, Buck Off at the Garden, presented by Ariat. It's January 7th at 7:45 and January 8th at 6:45. So thanks for having me.
everybody, Nick DeLuca here, play-by-play voice of Fordham men's basketball, reminding you to keep it locked right here on WFUV Sports, your home for Fordham basketball all season long. Don't miss a moment from a thrilling first year under head coach Kyle Neptune, plus highlights, analysis, and exclusive interviews with the Fordham men's basketball coaching staff. All of that on 90.7 FM, WFUVSports.org, and the Fordham Men's Basketball Spreaker page.
All right, we are back, and this is One-on-One, New York's longest-running sports call-in show. Brian Rabacs alongside Danny Scott, and you just listened to the Cooper Davis interview that we had. Danny, that was a fun conversation. That was really interesting. He gave a lot of interesting insights to his life and his upbringing. I enjoyed that conversation a lot with Cooper Davis.
Yeah, you know, in my time at WFUV, I never thought that I was going to be interviewing a professional bull rider. I don't think many people can say that they got to interview a professional bull rider, let alone someone that, as we now know, as good as Cooper Davis. He's won the world championship before. And actually, we found out before the show happened that he won the first round last night.
Sure
So
did.
he's starting off the new year just about exactly how he said he wanted to. And he finished number 3 in the world last year. It was a fun interview. I'm glad we got to talk to him. And, maybe, just maybe he made a little bit of a fan out of me, and I might be paying attention to his career as it moves forward.
Oh, yeah. You might have Cooper Davis's number 1 fan over here now, but we thank Cooper for taking the time to talk to us. And yeah, as you mentioned, he won round 1 of the Monster Energy Buck-Off last night at Madison Square Garden. Night 2 is tonight at 6:45, and he'll be competing again tonight. So it'll be great. We wish Cooper Davis all the best of luck. And yeah, what a fascinating interview, and a great thing to get here on one-on-one. But we're gonna move on now to some NBA talk, some basketball, and there's been a lot of topics of conversation in New York basketball recently, and we'll start with the Brooklyn Nets because this was a newsworthy week for them. A lot happened. Obviously, the big thing was Kyrie Irving came back and played his first basketball of the season in Wednesday night's game against the Indiana Pacers. And, the Nets, they've been struggling recently, and it was looking the same way on Wednesday night. Even with Kyrie, they were down 19 to the Indiana Pacers, who have just been decimated by injuries, COVID, everything, you name it. But, the Nets were able to amount a 19-point comeback and got a 129-121 victory on Wednesday. Kyrie had 22 points in 32 minutes, made some clutch shots in the fourth quarter too. And then things were looking high. It was Nets fans were feeling, okay, Kyrie's back. Maybe this can start something good and they can get back to their winning ways. But last night, they were home against Milwaukee Bucks, and they lost. They weren't really all that competitive. They lost, and it's just a tough game against, a team that beat them in the Eastern semis last year, lost 121-109, and the Nets have lost 4 of the last 5 and 5 straight games at home. So you can't ignore the elephant in the room, Danny, that they really could use Kyrie every night, couldn't they?
I mean, I don't know how you could not use Kyrie if you're any team in the NBA. He's such a dynamic scorer. And I'm gonna be completely honest with you. I am a Sacramento Kings fan, so the NBA has not exactly been kind to me. So I haven't exactly been kind to it and paid very close attention. But definitely the Brooklyn Nets and the Knicks, now that I go to Fordham, are 2 teams that I probably pay attention to closer than my own Sacramento Kings. And this whole saga with Kyrie Irving and everything that has been going on throughout his career even is pretty interesting. But like you mentioned, an absolutely excellent scorer, maybe the best player in the NBA right now, including centers, at scoring inside of 3 feet. Once the dude gets the ball in the paint, it's almost an automatic bucket. And having him back, I think, really, they needed to take a load off of Kevin Durant and James Harden. They are playing almost 40 minutes a game, and they don't have much scoring outside of those two. Kevin Durant is averaging 35 points over the last 10 games. And he had 39 in the Kyrie Irving game, and I believe he played 40 minutes. So when you have a guy that is probably at this point the favorite for the MVP, the Brooklyn Nets are one of the favorites, if not the favorites, to come out of the Eastern Conference. But you need another guy to take a load off of Kevin Durant and James Harden. And Kyrie Irving, I don't think there's many players that would be better for those two than Kyrie Irving with his scoring ability.
I mean, yeah, well said. I mean, Kyrie Irving, we obviously know all of his talent. And, in the fourth quarter of that game against the Pacers, he kind of just took over. He was a beast. He was really good. And the Nets it showed that, yeah, you can use a guy like this in your lineup, because outside of Kevin Durant and James Harden, they're having tough times finding guys that can consistently get buckets. I mean, Patty Mills has had some good nights, but especially recently, he has been ice cold. He's been inconsistent at times this year. So it's great that Kyrie Irving's back in any capacity for the Nets. Even just having him for road games is a huge boost. But you have to now add in the fact that, he's missing half your games now. because of the vaccination regulations in New York and that he can't play home games. And now, especially with the team struggling at home, you have to wonder, like, is this going to plague them the rest of the season? 5 straight games at home you've lost? You lost 5 straight games at home and you're the Brooklyn Nets? Like, that shouldn't happen. That should not happen. Fun fact, I was at the Barclays Center on Monday night for the game they played against the Grizzlies, and the starting unit didn't look good. They just didn't match up well with John Morant and the rest of the guys. And it's hard to really, pinpoint why they're struggling, because obviously you think, Kevin Durant, James Harden, that should be enough to win, but it hasn't. I mean, they're towards the top of the East. They're second in the Eastern Conference, but I mean, they've struggled to beat good teams all year. And I mean, I feel like the root of their struggle, they just can't find any consistency. They've been struggling through different rotations the whole year and just nothing's clicking. And I think, Danny, sooner or later, you got to find some consistency or else this thing's just going to keep going downhill.
Absolutely. And consistency in the NBA is key. When you look at recent championship teams, it's teams that have been playing together for a little bit and all their stars are healthy and playing well together. Last year with the Bucks, you had Giannis, who was the best player in the world. I think Kevin Durant has a pretty good argument for that case this year. But then you had also with him Chris Middleton, Drew Holiday, and they played well together. And I think that is something that the Nets are struggling with this year. Also, one thing with the Nets is they don't really have a glass cleaner, a guy that's going to bang down in the paint. I mean, you have LaMarcus Aldridge, but at this point, he's pretty old and is kind of just a mid-range shooter. He'll get you 5-6 boards a game. But when you're requiring these guys to shoot basically 60% from the field in order to win games, that's scary. That's why you need a guy like Kyrie Irving. You need a guy like Kyrie Irving at home games. I don't want to really get into this whole should he get vaccinated, should he not, because that's a touchy subject in a lot of places. However, if you're Kyrie Irving, if you're Kevin Durant, if you're James Harden, if you're any player, any fan, any member of the Nets organization, I think it's pretty clear that you need Kyrie Irving, and you need Kyrie Irving as much as possible. So I think that Kyrie Irving is an absolutely great player. I think he's going to help this Nets team win some games. And, even if he decides that, I'm still not going to get vaccinated, it's not for me, I know what's going on, blah, 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 and he's willing to make that sacrifice, yeah, that absolutely sucks for the Nets. But when he is on the floor, he's an electrifying player. He will put the ball in the basket, and he will help this Brooklyn Nets team win games. So if you're a Nets player, organization member, you got to do whatever you can to get Kyrie Irving on the floor as much as possible.
And, we were talking about consistency with the Nets. They've really been struggling to find any sort of consistency. There are some units that are just not getting in rhythm and just not keeping up with top scorers like the Grizzlies starting unit or the Bucks even last night. And you just have to imagine with Kyrie playing half the games on the road, so he's missing half the games, could that mess up the consistency too? I think so, because Kyrie's playing half the games and then the next game he's not going to be playing. And then he's going to be in and out, in and out, in and out, in and out. That's a hard dynamic to work with. And it's just the circumstances that have been presented on them. So I think it's great that Kyrie's back, but does it complicate more things? Maybe. And it's certainly not good that they're struggling right now. That doesn't help anything. So the Nets, they really got to turn this around because, at their best, they're the best team in the Eastern Conference, best team in the NBA even. But yeah, they got to turn the ship around. Steve Nash needs to get these guys right. They got to show more effort and just get back to winning. I mean, losing 4 or 5 and 5 straight home games, that's not going to cut it. And, now you're playing good teams and not exactly getting the job done. So that's something that's got to change with the Nets. They play the Spurs tomorrow at noon. Moving on across town, New York Knicks. A little bit of excitement with the Knicks, actually. That was I don't know if you saw any of it, Danny, but that was a crazy finish to their game against the Boston Celtics on Thursday night. They were down by 25 points, and they come all the way back and win the game with an improbable RJ Barrett buzzer beater off the glass. It was a huge win. and something Knicks fans can maybe get some optimism going forward. But as good as that win was, there's of course a talking point, and that is that Julius Randle not playing too well, and he makes a basket in the fourth quarter, and he just gives a nice little thumbs down to the Knicks crowd. And after the game, he was very clear that was just meant to shut up the fans. He might have said it a little more aggressively than that, but he voices displeasure to what the fans were saying about him. And then after, so I believe the next day, he said, I'm paraphrasing here, but he said, my comments after the game were an example of people saying things that they regret. So, I mean, this thumbs down thing, they don't want it. They don't want us to make it a story, but I think we kind of have to here, don't we, Danny?
Absolutely. It's absolutely a story. And before we get into the Julius Randle thing, there's just two things I want to bring up real quick. First of all, RJ Barrett, what a shot. Like you mentioned, I wasn't watching the game. However, I was tuned into the highlights and I was scoreboard watching because my phone was blowing up with all my friends that are Knicks fans going, what is happening right now? But RJ Barrett, great shot. He struggled in the game, but he wins it for the Knicks. I believe that was the first buzzer beater in the Garden in 10 years. And it sends the Celtics home. And if you're a Knicks fan, there's not a ton of things better than beating the Boston Celtics. And then on top of that, Evan Fournier have a game, 41 points, scores his career high, adds 8 boards, 2 assists, a steal, and a block. He has a monstrous game from 3, shooting 10 from 14 from 3-point land. And that's a great game from Evan Fournier. Now, getting into this Julius Randle stuff, did he not learn anything from Baez and Lindor?
That's the same thing.
The exact same thing. The difference with Julius Randle is Julius Randle was a king in New York City. He was a king. Last year as an all-star-esque year, and he struggled this year. He's had a disappointing season. Last year, he was at 24 points per game. This year, he's down to 19 points per game. Still scoring 19 points is respectable in the NBA. However, if we're being honest, Julius Randle is not a number one option on a championship-winning team. I mean, I think that's fairly clear. I think at best, he is a number 2 option on a championship winning team, and that's a maybe. He's a very good third option. I think at best, he is a decent number 2 option. So for him to go out and piss off all of New York is idiotic to me. I think Knicks fans have the right to be angry with him. I understand that he apologized and people are forgiving him and stuff, but that's just because of what he did last year. Lindor and Baez, they didn't prove anything, and they just decided to anger all of New York City. Julius Randle knows better. He has tasted the fruits of what it's like to be a superstar in New York City. And for him to go out and do something dumb like that is amazing to me. I have no idea why someone that was that respected and that loved in New York City would disrespect the fans like that. I will say I understand there are some things that maybe got to him. Getting booed is not an easy thing to deal with. Having any criticism, especially live at an arena when you're playing the game, that sucks. I can't even imagine what it's like to feel that. However, that's what you sign up when you play for the Knicks. That's what you sign up when you play for any team in New York City. All New Yorkers care about is product on the field or on the court. And Julius Randle this year has declined a little bit. And so I think that's fairly reasonable why New York City fans would be angry at him.
Well, yeah, I mean, Knicks fans have reason to be angry. They haven't met expectations so far this season, and it's just been a struggle for Julius Randle in particular, who was so good and so huge for their success last year. But, I mean, you almost took the words right out of my mouth. Like, did you learn nothing from your buddies Lindor and Baez across the street? Like, what did they prove by doing that? Nothing. And whether he's right to go after the fans or not, which he probably is, I mean, some of the criticisms can get ridiculous at times, and just the boos. Like, obviously, Julius Randle is doing his best out there, and it can't be easy to just get booed when you're, grinding every single night. But number one, this probably gives us a bad impression that you don't like the fans or don't care about their opinions. And then number two, it gives off the impression that you might not be able to handle New York, because this this comes in New York. It doesn't matter who you are. The criticism, the booing, it'll happen in New York. And I mean, take it from the Yankees. Giancarlo Stanton, I think up until recently, was the biggest victim of unnecessary New York criticism. And he never said a word, never showed any displeasure to the fan base. So to just go out and do this, it's just, why? You're just not making yourself look good. And you're just adding more fuel to the fire, adding more controversy, and just making it more of a story, which it's not the right path to go down. But I mean, Julius Randle, it's not been his year. And I mean, we wish the best to him that he can turn things around, but he's at a tough point in his career right now. And we'll see if he turns it around. The Knicks play the Celtics tonight again, this time in Boston, I believe at 7:30. So another thing for Knicks fans to look forward to tonight. But that's going to end our basketball talk. Coming up after the break, Gokul's going to be back with us. We got some more headlines to dive into. A lot of more interesting stuff here. Just loaded here on this episode of One-on-One. We're going to take a short little break, and we'll be right back here on One-on-One.
How's it going, everyone? I'm Jack Roach, Brooklyn Nets beat reporter for WFUV Sports. You can catch me live at the Barclays Center, where I get exclusive content directly from Coach Nash and players in press conferences. You can hear all that and more in post-game recaps on the WFUV Sports YouTube page, live updates from Barclays for our one-on-one segments, as well as our very own basketball podcast, Pick and Pod. WFUV Sports, your home for Brooklyn Nets basketball.
And we're back with some WFUV sports headlines. So I think in the first set of headlines, we talked a lot more about the NFL. And in this segment, we'll be primarily talking about a couple different things. I mean, to start off, we're going to be talking about a very anticipated return with Klay Thompson. And I think from at least the most recent news, he's expected to return tomorrow against the Cavaliers. So that is definitely a highly anticipated return that many, many fans are looking forward to. And another major piece of NBA news is obviously the All-Star voting. The first round of votes came out, so we'll definitely dig deep into that. And another news is something we don't frequently talk about, but tennis. Novak Djokovic, who's currently the number one ranked tennis player in the world, was recently denied entry into the Australian Open because of his vaccination status. So that COVID has definitely been a very it's been a hot topic that we've constantly discussed about. So we'll definitely dive deeper into this. And lastly, with regards to sports media, ESPN is looking to replicate the success they've had with Eli Manning and Peyton Manning with their Manning cast, with potentially Alex Rodriguez and Michael Kay. And essentially, obviously, Alex Rodriguez, a very polarizing figure. A lot of fans have had mixed opinions about whether or not they should do this, but we'll definitely dive deeper into that. And lastly would be the recent dismissal of Ken Rosenthal, which has definitely stirred up a lot of it's definitely stirred up a movement within the league, because a lot of players have called out the commissioner and the league for, mishandling this. But let's first start off with Klay's return. I mean, I mean, Danny, I know you're a Sacramento Kings fan, unfortunately, but with Klay Thompson's return, are you looking forward to it? I mean, what do you expect from the Warriors with Klay back? But yeah, what are we thinking?
You know, as much as it pains me to say, my hatred for the Warriors, I actually grew up a little bit of a Warriors fan because of my love for San Francisco sports. You see the Giants there, you got the Niners there, but Klay Thompson is one of my favorite NBA players of all time. I love him. He doesn't make waves. He's a fun guy, great shooter, plays the game exactly how it's meant to be played in today's era. So for Klay to be coming back is huge for the world in the NBA world. Excuse me, lost my train of thought there for a second. But he is a exceptional player, an exceptional shooter. He's fun to watch. He's polarizing. He has great charisma, and he got voted 4th in the All-Star voting for the backcourt. And he hasn't played a single minute in the NBA this season. He hasn't played a game of basketball in 31 months. But I am very curious to see how his comeback goes for him, whether he's going to be the same player that we saw. Coming off a torn ACL and a torn Achilles is no joke. That is a lot of rehab, and not many people, I think not many people would be able to come back from that in the same capacity that they were originally. But I do think Klay Thompson is one of those guys that has such a love for the game that he's going to do everything in his power to be the player that he once was.
Yeah, first, let's just give huge props to Klay Thompson because this has been an incredible journey back. He hasn't played a game since Game 6 of the NBA Finals in 2019. We're in the year 2022. So it has been a long time. I think it's been about 31 months. So that's 2.5 years. So he has been out of the game of basketball for a long time. So just as a fan standpoint, having him back on the floor, it's great. You know, we know the great player Klay Thompson is. He's an absolute beast. He's a great shooter, and he's just a great tandem to Steph Curry. Now, how he's going to be coming off of his injuries, he's had 2 major leg injuries in the last couple of years. That remains to be seen. It'll be interesting to see, but I think the big thing here is he's getting added to a Warriors team that's already been terrific this season. I mean, the Warriors have just been close to the top of the Western Conference the whole year. Look at the standings right now. They're 1 game behind the Suns for the 1st seed. So you're adding Klay Thompson to that. If Klay Thompson is Klay Thompson again, and he gets to that point eventually, who's stopping the Golden State Warriors? Besides the Brooklyn Nets, if they figure it out, who's going to stop them? I just don't know who could. So for basketball fans and for Warriors fans especially, this is huge, huge news and great for Klay Thompson as well and great for the Golden State Warriors.
And yeah, no, I totally agree with you, Brian and Danny. I mean, let's keep in mind that Klay Thompson, this is the same guy that scored 43 points off of only 4 dribbles. I mean, just to fathom that, I think that's just insane to score that many points in an NBA game setting off of just 4 dribbles. And also, he's the same guy that scored 37 points in 1 quarter. I mean, this guy is honestly obviously, you've probably seen all the jokes with where the Warriors gifted him a 77 jersey because he wasn't in the top 75 of all time. And honestly, a decent case can be argued for him, considering he's obviously one of the top 5 shooters of all time. He's won a couple of championships. And let's keep in mind that he's also a great defender. I mean, of course, he's not that, crazy Giannis where he gets a ton of blocks and a ton of steals every game, but he's still a great defender just given his size. So honestly, I think even if Klay is maybe 70 to 80% and he starts recuperating and just really finding his rhythm, I think this Warriors team is absolutely unstoppable. I mean, let's keep in mind that and just look at the All-Star voting too. Andrew Wiggins, he has really made a resurgence with this Warriors team. And Draymond Green too. They've all developed collectively. And I think with Klay's absence, it was definitely a blessing in disguise because a lot of players that weren't, getting playing time or that were sort of in the shadows of Klay Thompson, they started, finding their own rhythm and sort of finding their own spot. So I definitely think, yes, the Warriors are definitely a team to be reckoned with. And I'm really, really looking forward to how far they go in the playoffs and how much they achieve. And now going into the All-Star voting, and like we just said, Klay Thompson, hilarious that a guy who hasn't played in 2.5 years is in the top, I think, is it 4 or is it? He was definitely up there in the All-Star voting, which I don't know if
I think we said.
Yeah.
He was fourth in the backcourt, which is absurd. They're a guy that hasn't played a single minute in the NBA. But that just proves to you how much NBA fans love Klay Thompson.
Oh yeah, no, definitely. I mean, he's not a diva. He likes to keep to himself. He loves the game. He's very passionate, and I'm definitely looking forward to that return. But sort of shifting towards the All-Star voting. I mean, I think we had a ton of no surprises. I mean, LeBron obviously is going to be the captain again, leading the votes. Same with Kevin Durant, Steph Curry, and DeMar DeRozan. That's been another crazy surprise because he's really, really made another resurgence after playing for the Spurs for a couple of years, and now with the Bulls and the big three that they have there, he's really, really, reestablished himself as one of the league's premier players. But do you guys have any personal opinions in terms of if there are any potential snubs, or if maybe some of the vote rankings were slightly off? What do you guys think? I'm going to throw it to you, Brian.
I mean, look, I'm happy that Klay Thompson is back, but why is he getting so many votes? This is the problem with fan voting in All-Star games. I mean, because if Klay Thompson's getting the fan vote, it's just he hasn't played a single game, and I just don't know how you can do that. And by the time we get to the All-Star game in February, I mean, how many games is he going to play? 10? So I just think that's pretty skewed. But yeah, I'm glad that DeMar DeRozan's getting all these votes. I mean, he's been having a terrific season, and the Bulls are the top seed in the East. He's a large reason why. So I'm glad that he's getting a lot of votes, and that people are recognizing what he's doing, because with All-Star voting, it always tends to be a popularity contest. You could throw in Russell Westbrook as a huge vote, even though he hasn't been great at all points this season. And then you have the Giannis's and the Kevin Durant's and the James Harden. I mean, James Harden's been struggling too. So I'm glad DeMar DeRozan's getting a lot of votes, and a lot of people are recognizing his talents. So I think in some areas that they've kind of hit the nail on the head, but there are definitely areas where the fans can definitely work on a little bit,
Yeah, I agree with you. And right now there's 4 guys that have eclipsed 2 million votes, and that's LeBron, that's KD, Giannis, and Steph Curry. And I think it's pretty obvious that those are the 4 best guys in the NBA at this current moment. I agree. I'm happy for DeMar DeRozan and his resurgence in the NBA. He had a couple of down years down in San Antonio. Didn't make much noise, but the Bulls being the number 1 seed in the East right now, DeMar DeRozan is playing like a bona fide superstar at this current moment. I'm very happy for DeMar DeRozan. There was a couple of funny ones. Carmelo right now is number 8 for voting in the front court, and this one is amazing to me. How Damian Lillard is number 8 for the guards. Damian Lillard is an insane player and is not getting the respect that he deserves. And I think he deserves to be an all-star.
No, I mean, I'm personally a massive Dame fan, and I really, I've loved seeing him play. And in this year, yes, he's definitely had had to slow down, but he's starting to pick himself back up. And yeah, I personally was slightly irritated to see, just like last year where Dame wasn't a starter, this year Dame isn't getting the respect he deserved. But another thing I just wanted to point out was Derrick Rose. I mean, I honestly think Derrick Rose being above Fred VanVleet and Darius Garland is a bit preposterous in my opinion, because Fred VanVleet is having a great season. I mean, I know the Raptors aren't performing as well as they can be, but Fred VanVleet is averaging almost 21 points a game, and Derrick Rose hasn't even played for a while because I think he's injured. Please correct me if I'm wrong.
He's out for 8 weeks, right?
Oh yeah, okay, right there. Then perfect. Yeah, so I don't see why Derrick Rose should be above players like Fred VanVleet, who've been playing really well. But yeah, other than that, I think every other player who's voted on was pretty accurate. And obviously, we'll see over the next couple of weeks how the numbers really start changing into the placements. And in the end, let's hope that the fans at least get the majority of the players right this time.
Hopefully.
But yeah, now moving on to another topic, which is COVID. I mean, COVID's been, it's definitely a very controversial topic, and it's a lot of gray areas. Many people have different opinions, but at the end of the day, every single sports league is trying to promote safety. And recently, Novak Djokovic was denied entry into the Australian Open. And I mean, from what I've been reading, it's become very political. I mean, I think I read somewhere that the Serbian president called out the Australian government, I think, for harassment for them denying him entry. And I think his father was. It was a lot of things that really convoluted. It's just sort of how the sort of the rules and things like that. But Brian, I mean, what do you think about the situation? Do you think he should be entered, or?
I don't know what to make of this whole situation. I've heard so many different things that, he should be entered. He has an exemption, but you have to look into the fact that he's not actually vaccinated. So it's a kind of a tough deal, traveling to Australia. But I mean, the big thing is, did he get any sort of exemption? And if he did, and then they're just going back on their word saying, "Oh, no, sorry, you can't play in the tournament." Like that's a little messed up. But at the same time, there are rules and regulations in place, and I don't really know where this thing's going to go, because it's really at a standstill of everyone voicing all their different opinions. So I don't really know what road this whole Djokovic situation is going to go down.
Yeah, it's very. Oh, my bad. This whole situation is very interesting to me, because he got an exemption from the Australian Open in whatever county it's being held in. Sorry, I'm not super caught up with my Australian Open knowledge, but he was denied by the Australian government, and that's the whole situation. And now he's going to be meeting with a judge in court on Monday to discuss the exemption and try to figure out what is going on. I think for Australia and this whole situation, obviously a big tennis match like this generates a lot of income for a country. So to deny the best player in the world and arguably the best tennis player of all time entry into your event is kind of ridiculous to me. He got an exemption. He has, I'm assuming he has proven with multiple COVID tests that he does not have COVID at this current moment. So to deny him entry because of something like this, it sucks for the Australian Open and the people that put that together.
And yeah, I think sort of the one thing I sort of wanted to add on was the primary justification that that Novak's team at least had was he got COVID on December 16th, and I know that there's a at least there's a belief that once you get COVID and you recover from it, there's a certain level of, I guess, tolerance that you have, or you have a certain level of immunity. But obviously, no one really knows the exact amount of period of time that you'll have that for after you get it or after you recover from it. So definitely, I think I can see the Australian government's perspective on the fact that he has to be vaccinated for him to enter the country. But I really think it just becomes really interesting when you see that, at least in apparently legal findings and legal proceedings, what he's been trying to say is that he was granted an exemption by, I think it was the Australian Tennis Committee or something. Please don't quote me on this. But given that and the fact that he gets denied right after, and he also said that that the Australian government didn't give him enough time for him to consult with his legal team, I think this just really, it really convolutes the situation, and it's really unclear. And I hope he plays, but at the end of the day, if he doesn't play, I think he has many other opportunities to win many other majors. And given the player he is, I think he'll be extremely successful. But now moving on to the last topic, which is A-Rod. I don't know if you guys have probably seen this, but ESPN is trying to recreate the Manning cast with baseball, but instead have A-Rod and Michael Kay. I mean, I know A-Rod is is a very controversial figure, but as major baseball fans, I mean, what do you guys think? Would you guys watch this? Would you guys like this? Or
Absolutely. I'm pumped for this. I mean, first of all, I'm a Yankee fan, so Michael Kay has been on in my living room, on the TV like every single night during baseball season. And then A-Rod was one of my favorite players growing up. So yeah, of course I'm going to watch it. I think A-Rod's hilarious, and I think Michael Kay, he's a funny guy too, and also WFUV Sports alumni. So that's something there for you. So we're obviously very excited for that, and I can't wait for that. I think the Manning cast type stuff is the future of kind of sports broadcast. I think we're going to see a lot of these in the future. So I'm pumped. Yeah, I love both of these guys, and I can't wait.
Yeah, I agree. I don't know how you don't like Michael K or A-Rod at this point in both of their careers.
A-Rod.
Yeah, well, A-Rod has completely rebranded his image, and he's widely loved throughout most of baseball media. I think this is a great way for ESPN to generate some cash. The Manning cast has been widely successful according to their numbers. So to add something like this to baseball, especially two guys that everyone knows, two guys that everyone loves, it's going to bring more viewership into baseball, which is something that they've been trying to figure out for a number of years now.
Yeah, and I totally agree with you. I think having retired or injured athletes really common in games, I think I would love that. It really brings a fresh perspective to the game. But moving on to sort of another extremely controversial piece of news, which was the recent dismissal of Ken Rosenthal, who worked for the MLB Network. And I think many people around the league are saying that his dismissal, and given the fact that he was a strong critique of the MLB commissioner, it really sort of violates sort of the integrity of sports journalism. And I mean, again, major baseball fans, like, what do you guys think of this dismissal? Do you guys think it was valid? Do you think?
It's not like, why? You didn't have to do this at all. If anything, Rob Manfred is just making himself look worse, as if that was why he keeps making himself look worse and worse and worse. I think I read what I believe was the critique that got him fired from the MLB Network. It was like nothing. He was almost just like reporting a fact of that, like, players were like not happy with what the commissioner was doing, and players still aren't with the backlash they've received. So I think that this is not the way to go, and the MLB Network just looks worse. But I mean, more power to Ken Rosenthal. He's going to keep doing great things. He's with Fox. He's with The Athletic. So I think Ken Rosenthal will be fine. But this is a bad move, for Rob Manfred and the MLB Network.
Yeah, Ken Rosenthal is one of the most liked MLB analysts, broadcasters, whatever you want to call them. And for the MLB Network to not bring him back is ridiculous, and especially over Rob Manfred. I think it's well documented at this point that a lot of people do not like Rob Manfred, and he has not been exactly great for baseball. The ratings have dropped. He's made a lot of questionable decisions. A lot of players are angry with him. So I think because he said something light, like you said, I forget exactly what was said in that article, but it's ridiculous to me. And I think they fired the wrong guy. Let's go back to that whole argument. Rob Manfred, it's probably time for him to get out of there. Just for MLB's sake, it's time to bring in some new life.
I agree. This is the Ken Rosenthal situation, wrong move, leaves a sour taste in your mouth, but that is what it is. So we'll see how that continues to unfold, but Ken Rosenthal still has his jobs with Fox and still with The Athletic. And that'll wrap up our headline segment here. Thank you once again, Gokul, for giving us these headlines and giving us something to talk about. So we got another short break coming up, but coming up after the break, we have an interview with bowl season executive director Nick Carparelli. He took the time to talk with me and Danny, and it was a great conversation to have in the swing of college football bowl season. I definitely enjoyed it a lot, and hopefully you will too. We have the Nick Carparelli interview coming up after the break. We'll be right back.
How's it going, everyone? I'm Jack Roach, Brooklyn Nets beat reporter for WFUV Sports. You can catch me live at the Barclays Center, where I get exclusive content directly from Coach Nash and players in press conferences. You can hear all that and more in post-game recaps on the WFUV Sports YouTube page, live updates from Barclays for our one-on-one segments, as well as our very own basketball podcast, Pick and Pod. WFUV Sports, your home for Brooklyn Nets basketball.
This is One on One, New York's longest-running sports call-in show on 90.7 FM, WFUV.org, and WFUVSports.org. It's WFUV and WFUV HD, New York. Listener-supported public media from Fordham, the Jesuit University of New York. right here on 90.7 FM, WFUV.org, and WFUVsports.org.
One-on-one, New York's longest running sports call-in show. I'm Brian Rabacs, joined alongside Danny Scott. And right now we are very lucky to be joined by Nick Carparelli. He's the executive director of Bowl Season, which promotes all the college football bowl games. Nick, thank you so much for taking the time to be with us today.
My pleasure to be with you guys.
So with Bowl Season recently in full swing, I just want to ask you, how exactly did you get involved with Bowl Season? And for those unfamiliar, what's the organization really all about?
Yeah, so I was hired a little over 2 years ago as the executive director of the Football Bowl Association. That organization had existed for 30 years and was nobody knew what the FBA was. It was more of an internal trade association like any other group of like businesses coming together. They had an annual meeting and they all kind of do the same thing. So they shared stories, et cetera. But when they hired me, they wanted something bigger and better for bowl season. They felt that was our time of year, that we were really kind of the halo brand that pulled together all 44 bowl games. And we were essentially the March Madness of college football. We were just never organized in a formal way. So we created the bowl season brand, adopted that name officially, created a logo, and we're using that platform to celebrate college football for that 3-week period in late December, early January, where so many people turn on bowl games and watch them.
Yeah, going along with that kind of idea with how big of a festivity is, how important do you think like bowl season is, and what does it kind of mean to you as the director of bowl season?
I honestly feel that bowl season is one of the greatest promotional vehicles for the sport of college football that they've had, and it's been around for 100 years. I think sometimes when you have something exist for so long, you take it for granted. But if I were to tell you, if the bowl games didn't exist, and I were to say, I got this great idea, at the end of the regular season, every team that's 500 or better gets to play one more game against a team that they wouldn't typically schedule in a part of the country that they wouldn't typically play, and give those communities across the country an opportunity to experience a level of college football that they're not used to seeing in person. What do you think? I think most people would say, wow, what a great idea, but how would you ever execute that? Well, the bowl season's been doing that for, like I said, for 100 years now. And it's really special. It's meaningful. All you need to do is look at the television ratings. The Alamo Bowl and the Music City Bowl had 2 of the top 3 viewership of all college football games on ESPN all season long. And those games ended on December 30th. We have a whole batch of games on December 31st and on New Year's Day that we haven't gotten the TV viewership numbers from yet. But having watched some of those games and how exciting they were, I can't wait to see how many people watch those games.
Found it very interesting diving into the mission statement of bowl season and what it looks to accomplish. And one of those things is highlighting the distinctiveness between each bowl game. Can you discuss how this is done and the importance of doing so?
Yeah, it's not something we have to try to do. It's just kind of the way it is, and actually bowl season's kind of pulling all the bowl games together. But at the same time, we never want to take away from their uniqueness. Every bowl game is different, and their uniqueness is based on how long the bowl game has been around, the history and tradition of those games, where it's located, the part of the country, what's unique to that part of the country. Every game does a great job of showcasing their community and the best that it has to offer to the world during the broadcast for sure. But during the 4, 5, 6 days that the schools are in town experiencing those communities, they're really unbelievable opportunities for those student athletes to go places they've never been before and to experience things that create memories for them that last a lifetime.
I saw going along with that a little bit too. You were very instrumental in creating the Pinstripe Bowl at Yankee Stadium. Can you just talk a little bit about that and why that was so important to you to bring a bowl game to New York City?
Yeah, I think for a number of reasons. At the time, I was I worked for the Big East Conference. I was the deputy commissioner in charge of football, And, during the years of Big East football, we had some very, very successful seasons, some successful programs. When it came to bowl season, we were always kind of the visiting team. Our schools being located in the Northeast had the furthest distance to travel. It was harder for our fans to get there. When the new Yankee Stadium was built, I had the idea. I approached the Yankees. I said, we should have a bowl game here. Even though it's going to be cold, Yankee Stadium's unique. Christmas time in New York City is unique experience for people. And it's been, 12 years ago, we started that game, and it's become very, very popular. Teams lobby to get into that game. I think at a higher level, though, it's really important to expose the college football's postseason to the Northeast. There's a lot of people that live in New York, a lot of people that live in New England, in DC. We have the Military Bowl in DC. We have the Fenway Bowl that hopes to kick off next year up in Boston. So to have a postseason college football presence in the Northeast, I think is really important to the game.
We're talking with Nick Carparelli here on One, and it's very, very cool how bowl season seems to touch more than just the players on the field and expands more than just the game itself. So how do you feel bowl season impact reaches outside of the players and the product put on the field?
Yeah, so these games are community-based events, and the communities that host these games are extremely proud to host this football game and to showcase their community each season. And while the average fan might turn the TV on for 3 hours in December and watch the game, what they don't see is that the year-long schedule of activities and events that benefit that community, all revolving around the bowl game, whether it's bowl games sponsor various things such as youth football leagues, road races, community uplift activities, whether it's refurbishing a playground or rundown sports fields, or some of the philanthropic activities are flat out, donating money or grants to people in need in that community. Teachers is something that bowl season has really gotten behind with our Extra Yard for Teachers program. All 44 bowl games have donated money to teachers to use for their teaching efforts, for supplies in the school, and really, really great programs that benefit the community outside of just the game.
Moving over to a little bit of a darker side, I guess you could say nowadays, with the COVID pandemic, bowl season kind of got interrupted a little bit this year, and some teams were pulling out of games. How difficult was that for you to deal with, and how difficult was it to try to find teams to replace the teams that backed out?
Yeah, that was certainly an unfortunate situation with the 5 bowl games that planned on playing that were not able to play. I think this year was a perfect storm. You had COVID still lingering. Let's all keep our fingers crossed that that'll be resolved next year. And that obviously was not an issue unique to bowl season. I think we're dealing with that in everything we do. At the same time, college athletics is seeing, the transfer portal open up and student athletes having the ability to transfer more freely than before. And with anything new, I think you're seeing a higher amount of student athletes wanting to transfer now at the beginning of that new option than they will in the future. And then the third thing is, you're always going to have a handful of opt-outs, guys who are entering the draft that don't want to play. That's a very small number, but you pull together all 3 of those factors that are rearing their head at one time. That's what made this season challenging. But I also think it's something that's an aberration that you're not going to see often in the future.
And kind of going off of that, last season must have been an incredible challenge with, limited amounts of bowl games and then, limited fans in attendance. So with this year providing a little bit better circumstances, how important do you think it was for college football and college football fans to get a full bowl game schedule, or close to a full bowl game schedule once again?
Yeah, I think it was extremely important. You saw that starting Labor Day weekend with the regular season, how anxious people were to get back in the stands to watch live football in its entirety with all the atmosphere. Television ratings this season were off the charts. And then it got to bowl season and fans wanted to go to a unique place to watch their team play. And, we saw a lot of great celebrations at the end of these bowl games. I saw, you see Coastal Carolina and the way that team reacted after their bowl win. You see UAB upsetting the highest ranked team in BYU that they've ever upset in their history. You see Kentucky beating Iowa in the Citrus Bowl. I was there, an SEC team, but just so elated to win that bowl game. They've won 4 in a row now. Stories across the board. So extremely meaningful to everyone involved.
I paid very close attention to the whole season this year, and it was one of the most entertaining seasons I've ever watched. There were so many upsets, and there were so many great bowl games that happened over the week, and the Rose Bowl was probably the best game I've ever personally watched. How do you think this season and this bowl season has played into the rich history of college football?
Yeah, it plays very favorably into the history. I don't know how they rank. I wasn't alive for all the bowl seasons, and I certainly don't remember all the ones I was, but it's hard to imagine a better bowl season in terms of the unique matchups, teams that wouldn't normally schedule each other, the scoring, the upsets, the celebrations. You mentioned the Rose Bowl, watching that walk-on quarterback for Utah come in. I was nervous for that kid, and to have him throw that touchdown pass. I know they lost the game, but what a cool moment that was. That Purdue Tennessee Music City Bowl. It was kind of like whoever had the ball last was going to win. And I think that's how it played out. And that was so much fun. So there's a lot of examples of that. And, I don't know if it was the most exciting bowl season ever, but it quite possibly could have been.
I want to quickly shift gears to the fact that you created a podcast called Bowl Season Stories. And this essentially brings on guests within college football, and they discuss their own experiences with bowl games. So I want to ask, what went into the creation of that podcast, and how does it enhance the bowl season experience?
So one of the things we, tried to do in creating the bowl season brand in general was to use it as a platform to tell all the great stories about bowl games. Again, people turn on the game for 3 hours and they think, it's easy to think it's just another game, but these former players from, a few years ago to many, many years ago, all have the same types of stories, going to a unique location with their friends, with their teammates, having a lot of fun, playing a bowl game. And they have these memories that have lasted them a lifetime and are some of the best memories in their life. And so we simply created the podcast to use that as a platform to hear all those great stories, to tell all those great stories. And we've had some amazing guests from Tony Dorsett, Kirk Herbstreit, Coach Dave Wanstatt, Daryl Moose Johnston, Rocket Ismail, Tony Casillas, on and on. Guys who just talk about their bowl experiences and a lot of them talk about the opt-outs these days and how they just can't understand that. Every single guest we've had has said we would do anything to play one more football game. None of them could imagine saying, boy, I wish I skipped my last game.
There's been a lot of talks over the recent years that there are too many bowl games. As the director of bowl season, do you have anything that you would say to anyone that says there's too many bowl games nowadays?
Yeah, I guess I would ask them what you're basing that statement on. No one's forcing teams to play in bowl games. No one's forcing communities to host them. No one's forcing 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 million people to watch bowl games. So I don't really get the question or the statement. We had a situation this year where there were it was possible that there was going to be a bowl eligible team left out, and you would have thought we were telling them they had to end their football program. They were so distraught, and we found a way to accommodate all the bowl eligible teams this year. So, and then when we had a couple of games where a team backed out, there was no shortage of teams that were willing to fill in. We had some 5 and 7 teams that raised their hand, said, we'll play. We had teams that already played early bowl games, said, we'll play another. So I don't see any indication that there are too many bowl games. The question mystifies me, to be honest with you.
Talking with Nick Carparelli here on One. And we have one last question before we let you go. And I don't mean to put you on the spot, but by the time this airs, we'll be 2 days away from the national championship game between Georgia and Alabama on Monday night. So I'm just going to throw it out there. I got to ask, number one, how much are you looking forward to this matchup? And if you got a prediction, could you give it to us?
Well, I think the SEC is going to bring home a championship. I'm pretty confident of that. I look forward to most college football games. Who isn't looking forward to the championship game of any sport? This is the Super Bowl. It's Game 7 of the World Series. It's the college football championship. It's the pinnacle of the season of the sport. I'll be there. I'm looking forward to seeing it. If I had to pick one, I think it's hard to pick against Alabama until they prove that they're not worthy of being the national champion. Then I'm going to have to go with them.
Got Georgia and Alabama for the national championship on Monday night. And that will do it here. We just talked with Nick Carparelli, Executive Director of Bowl Season. Nick, thank you so much for taking the time to talk to us today.
Great job, guys. Thanks for having me.
This is Sam Davis, broadcaster for Fordham Women's Basketball on WFUV Sports. Stay locked in all season long on the WFUV Sports Spreaker page, where you can find our live broadcasts as well as an archive of games played earlier in the year. We come on the air 10 minutes before game time, offer up the one-on-one pregame, halftime, and postgame reports, in addition to covering all the game action. The Rams women's basketball team is an exciting group in pursuit of another A10 championship. Join the action with WFUV Sports on Spreaker.
Welcome back to One on One. This is New York's longest running sports call-in show. Brian Rabacs, Danny Scott, Gokul Perugu taking you until 2 p.m. today. And that was just a great interview with Nick Carparelli, as Executive Director of Bowl Season. And, he gave his own insights into the national championship game on Monday night. But, Danny, I think it's time we give our own outlooks on the game. What do you think?
Yeah, I completely agree. It was a fun interview, and talking to someone that's that knowledgeable about college football, been involved in the game for that long. He's been around the NFL, been around college football, very insightful, and we got a lot of knowledge from him, and it was a fun interview, but I cannot wait to get into this discussion. College football is my favorite sport, so getting to talk about college football at any point, especially the national championship between the two best teams in college football, I got a lot of takes on this, and it's going to be a fun conversation.
Well, yeah, we should be excited to get into it. Now, we'll all give our predictions for the game, but it's worth noting the games that took place last week. And, Alabama and Georgia, obviously the winners. Alabama won the Cotton Bowl over Cincinnati. They won that game by a score of 27-6. And then Georgia just totally ran over Michigan in the Orange Bowl, getting a 34-11 victory. So with this being said, and kind of reflecting on this a little bit, I'll start with you, Danny. What did you think of these games from last week, and how does it kind of shape the championship picture as we see it?
Yeah, I don't think anyone was really truly surprised with the outcomes of either of these games. I think it was pretty well documented that Alabama was better than Cincinnati and Georgia was better than Michigan. They were both favorites going into the game. Alabama just decided to run the ball down Cincinnati's throat. Brian Robinson, 204 yards, didn't get a touchdown, but Bryce Young didn't have his best game as a passer. He only had 181 yards, but has 3 touchdowns. So they played a very balanced game. They suffocated Cincinnati on defense, held Cincinnati, who has a very potent offense. Desmond Ridder is an incredible quarterback, probably going to be a first-round pick, to 6 points, 2 field goals. Couldn't get the ball in the end zone. And then on the flip side, the other game, Georgia, this was the defense that everyone expected. that everyone expected to see it in the SEC championship. They absolutely demolished Michigan. They pretty much shut down Aiden Hutchinson and David Ajabu, who are two of the premier pass rushers in college football. Probably both going to be first-round picks. Definitely both going to be first-round picks. And Aiden Hutchinson right now is predicted to be the top pick. So to shut those two down, Evan Neal for Alabama, their left tackle, had a great game. Didn't allow very many pressures to Bryce Young, just let him do his thing, get the ball on the ground, and they both just dominated. Each of them dominated the game that they played, and it's fairly clear that these two are the two best teams in college football. They're the two best teams year in, year out. Alabama especially. Nick Saban is the greatest coach of all time at this point for the world of college football. So to see him in another national championship does not surprise me at all. And then that Georgia defense this year, they need some play out of Stetson Bennett, but he played great against Michigan, 313 passing yards, 3 touchdowns. If he can play like that against Alabama, that team is scary.
And in terms of the Michigan and Georgia game, I mean, I'll be honest with you. One of my best friends goes to Michigan, and he has voiced his frustrations with the quarterback with me multiple times. And given they're a run-heavy team and the fact that Georgia's run defense is absolutely unstoppable with the monster tackles they have on that line, I think it was pretty expected for Georgia to pretty much dominate the entire game. And of course, it was a good thing to see, Michigan, beat Ohio State, and they were really sort of the dark horses and underdogs. And it would have been nice for them to win, but at the end of the day, Georgia's historic defense has been just on an absolute tear this season. And with Alabama, I mean, they are sort of the golden standard for consistency in terms of the success they've had for the last couple of years in terms of how they recruit and how they get all their players. And yes, Bryce Young has had a great and phenomenal Heisman season, and he's honestly a very dynamic quarterback. And I'm really looking forward to seeing how far he goes in terms of his college football career and potential NFL career. But yeah, I mean, at the end of the day, I think this matchup is good. And I know that Georgia's definitely looking forward to, at least from some of the interviews and some of the research I've done, Kirby Smart, the coach, is really looking forward to making a statement and making a comeback. And I really think this will be a great game, and I'll definitely be tuned to it.
Oh, yeah, I think it should be a great game as well. I mean, you look at last week, we keep crediting the Georgia defense, which has been one of the premier defenses in college football the whole year. But, I mean, their offense on New Year's Eve was just unbelievable. I mean, Stetson Bennett, you mentioned the 313 passing yards and 3 touchdowns. And, we can talk about what the defense did, but the offense had 521 total yards. I mean, how can you stop that with a defense as good as Georgia's, and that now you have to deal with 521 yards of offense from the offensive unit? I mean, that just leads to an unstoppable team in Georgia. And that's the Georgia we saw for a lot of the season, just dominating teams, just showing that they're a step above everybody else. And they have one blip on their radar, which we'll talk about soon, but Georgia, for the most part, has just been a real force in the college football regime. And this should just be, they should be loaded and ready to go for Monday night. Now, in terms of Alabama with the 27-6 win over Cincinnati, you mentioned, Danny, just the run game. I mean, Brian Robinson had 204 yards on the ground, and then that just led Bryce Young to, you didn't even have to do much. I mean, if you're getting 200 rushing yards on the ground, that's pretty amazing. So your quarterback doesn't have to do a whole lot. So a 181-yard game for Bryce Young is nothing too crazy to worry about, especially when you're throwing 3 touchdowns. So both these teams had great performances in their respective semifinal games. And now the two are going to meet in the college football national championship on Monday night, Georgia, Alabama. The interesting thing about these two teams is that they've played each other before. They played each other about a month ago in the SEC championship game. And going into this game, I thought Georgia was going to be a lock. Alabama was struggling and Georgia was just playing so well. But Alabama just ended up showing us who they all were. And they absolutely just dominated the most part they just dominated the game. I mean, a huge win. I believe the score was 41-21 Alabama, and Bryce Young had himself a huge day and just cemented himself as the Heisman favorite with 421 passing yards and 3 touchdowns. Just an incredible game. And Danny, you got to think, if you're Georgia, this game's got to be in the back of your mind, given that Alabama just had your number a couple of weeks ago. No?
Yeah, I think it's in the back of their mind, but I think it's in the back of their mind for a different reason. I think they're going to be coming into this game fired up. Kirby Smart is a great coach. He's been documented as being a great leader. Everyone that plays for Kirby Smart loves Kirby Smart. So I think they're going to be using this game to just add fuel to the fire. Gokul mentioned that the defense, you got Jordan Davis, who is an absolute behemoth of a football player and a great one on top of that. He eats up like 3-4 blocks per play. So this defense is very scary. And if they can contain Bryce Young better than they did in the SEC championship, I like Georgia in that, but we'll get the predictions in a few minutes. But yeah, no, this game definitely has to be a little bit in the back of your mind. But like I mentioned at the top of the show, it's really tough to beat a team twice, especially a team as good as Georgia. That defense is suffocating. Best defense in the country and one of the best defenses in college football history. And if they can get play out of Stetson Bennett, we've had a long-running joke on Gridiron that Stetson Bennett has a noodle arm and he can't throw the ball. He threw the ball well against Michigan. And in that SEC championship, he did have 340 yards, but most of that came in garbage time when Alabama was like, oh, we already have this game in the bag. Let's just throw it to Brock Bowers. And so I'm excited to see what this game brings. There's going to be a lot of energy on both sides. And I think Georgia is using that SEC championship as fuel to the fire to go, you know what? We got embarrassed. This was a bad showing for us, but we're not going to let that happen again. That's for sure.
And yeah, no, I totally agree with you, Danny. I think the key is the Georgians sort of needs to look at their weaknesses or sort of what went wrong in the first game. Because I think when you look at the statistics, when you look at it in terms of the overall performance from the pass to the run game, in terms of the run game, I'm pretty sure, I think it was, they contained Brian Robinson relatively well. I think he had 22 carries for only around it was 70 something yards. I think it was 76 yards. So that was only about 3 yards a carry. But then when you looked at Bryce Young, that's when they really can sort of contain him. Because obviously, as we all know, Bryce Young, he's a very mobile quarterback. And he was able to get 40 yards on the ground and rushing for a touchdown. On top of that, I think it was over 3 touchdowns and almost 400 passing yards. I think the key will be to really, pressure him and really just sort of keep him in the pocket and just bring the constant pressure upon him. Because we know that Alabama's receivers like Jameson Williams can blow the game wide open with his speed and just his play. And at the end of the day, I think it's all about how tenacious this Georgia defense is, because let's keep in mind that if you don't take into account the Alabama game, they only allowed 10 touchdowns, which is just insane to me. And given that, this offense wasn't really required to perform at an explosive level, and which can obviously be seen with all the statistics. But I think at the end of the day, I think I was also reading with Kirby Smart when he was discussing the game plan. One of their strengths was that they were able to rotate so many players through the defensive line, given just the depth and talent that they have. And on top of Jordan Davis, who was obviously a behemoth, and is essentially just like a stop sign. He just does not let a running back get past him. And on top of that, when you look at guys like Jalen Carter, who I think Kirby Smart said he was better than me in terms of athleticism, he said he was freakier than Jordan Davis. So when you take that into account, I think Georgia will really, really come out of the gates very strong, and they will sort of have that fire within them to, really sort of prove the doubters wrong. And I think they're favored for this game. So I really think it is their game to their game to win, because of the fact that, they just have had a historic defense. And at the end of the day, if they, play to their level, I think they should be able to contain Alabama. But like we've said before, and as we've seen before, Alabama and Nick Saban, you can expect anything from them. And obviously Bryce Young, he's a great quarterback. And at the end of the day, he can do anything. He can rush on the ground for 100 yards. He can pass for 300 yards. So I think at the end of the day, it'll come down to how Georgia contains Bryce Young.
Yeah, and they certainly didn't do a great job of that in the SEC championship game. I mean, Bryce Young was just throwing the ball all over the place. And then Jamison Williams had 184 receiving yards with 2 touchdowns. I mean, what a day for them. So, I mean, because of this, I feel like the general consensus is just that no one's going to beat Alabama, right? I mean, so many people just kind of looked at that game and was like, okay, Alabama's back and no one's going to beat them. And I feel like I kind of shared similar sentiments last week. I thought Alabama was going to beat Cincinnati by way more. I thought it was going to be a total non-competitive. Alabama was going to score like 45, 50 points, but that didn't happen. You know, Cincinnati, they hung in there for a while. So Alabama, it was a dominant game, but it wasn't as dominant as, you know, you'd think for a team that blew out Georgia by 20 points the last time they met. But yeah, you mentioned the Georgia defense is incredible. You know, they were for the whole season except for that Alabama game, but they rebounded from that Alabama game and they played great against Michigan. So really, when this defensive unit shows up, like Georgia is almost an impossible team to beat. Georgia, I think a lot of people are forgetting how good they are. And obviously Alabama deserves a lot of credit, but Alabama showed some kind of weak points at some areas this year. You know, they went on a little bit of a skid at the end of the season, you know, with the barely getting past Auburn. I mean, if they didn't beat Alabama, we're almost talking, or excuse me, if Alabama didn't almost beat Georgia, you know, we're talking about them not even getting a college football playoff spot. So it's something to talk about, but you do have to mention Alabama did just beat this team by 20 points. But I think it's important to mention, as Danny said, that could linger in the heads of Georgia for all the right reasons. I think that, you know, this loss almost seems like a wake-up call. And, you know, you saw that when they came out firing against Michigan last week. So it's interesting to see how Georgia will respond. Will they be more competitive, or is Alabama just that much better than them? We don't know. We'll find out Monday night. So with that being said, I got to ask you guys your predictions, you know, putting you on the spot, front and center. Give your pick as to who's winning the national championship this season. Gokul, I'm going to start with you, and then Danny, you can give your pick after. So Gokul, who's winning the national championship this year?
I'm going to be honest with you. You know, Alabama, they've been the standard for success, but I honestly think Georgia is going to win, because at the end of the day, I think you've probably heard this, you know, statement a lot of times, but, you know, defense wins championships. And I think with that sort of tenacity and incentive they have had, you know, to win, given that given their loss a couple weeks ago, I think all the defense, from the defensive line to the corners to the safeties, everyone is going to be fired up, and Kirby Smart is definitely going to make sure he sort of instills that in his players before they play. And I really think that defense will definitely contain Bryce Young and really get to him, because I think that was sort of one of the things Kirby Smart said. He said he has certain standards for every single game that the defense needs to meet. And if they meet those standards like they have the entire season, I don't see the Georgia offense having that much of a trouble, you know, getting past the Alabama defense and pulling out a tight win. But I definitely think it's going to be a close game. And I hope it's going to be a close game, because unlike last year, which is a complete blowout, I definitely want it to be, you know, more interesting. But I think Georgia will win.
If it's anything like the national championship we got from a few years ago between Alabama and Georgia, everyone is in for a treat. I think really it depends on if Georgia's defense shows up. If Georgia's defense shows up like they did in every single game except for the SEC championship, I think Georgia wins this game, and I think they potentially win this game handily. However, that is something to be said when you have Bryce Young, the Heisman, you got Jamison Williams and Brian Robinson, and Alabama's defense is no slouch. They have Will Anderson, who is probably the best defensive player in college football at the moment, maybe outside of Aiden Hutchinson. So it really depends on if Georgia's defense shows up. However, I'm going to say they do show up. I think everyone's going to be fired up. I think Kirby Smart is a great coach. He's going to lead them, and they're going to be pumped up. I agree with Gokul. I think it's going to be a decent game. I would say Georgia probably wins somewhere in the range of a touchdown to 10 points, somewhere right in there. But I could very easily seeing it go to Alabama, just because of how good that offense is, how good Bryce Young is, and how good of a coach Nick Saban is.
So I can I'm definitely going to echo the same type of sentiments as you just had. I definitely see this game going either way. I think these are two powerhouses, and it almost should surprise no one that this is our national championship game. But I've been doing a lot of asking around, and a lot of the people I'm asking, with their picks, a lot of people are giving me Alabama. So I was a little surprised to see that Georgia was actually favored, considering I thought this was a heavy Alabama favorite game. But in terms of my opinion, if you want my personal thoughts on it, I think Georgia is going to win. And I think, it'll probably be competitive. I think Georgia has a good chance to win this game with ease almost. I mean, you can bring up the SEC championship all you want, but I think that was a real wake-up call for Georgia. Georgia, you have to remember, in that game, they had their playoff spot locked up. And the only way they weren't going to be the one seed is if they lost, which they did. But then again, you get Michigan, and they took care of business there, beat one of the best Michigan teams in recent memory. So now you take that momentum and you give the fact that, this team hasn't forgotten that, Alabama steamrolled them. They're probably embarrassed. And given how good we know this team is, I'm going to have to go with Georgia. I think Georgia is the best team in college football, and I think they're going to take home the national championship, hopefully in a great game. But these are great teams. Georgia, could blow them out. Maybe Alabama has a big game. We'll see. We're hoping for the best. We're all looking forward to it. That's Monday night, Alabama and Georgia in the national championship game. And that'll wrap us up here. We're running out of time here on One-on-One, but we got one more segment coming up for you after the break. Danny and I will be discussing some of the MLB Hall of Fame ballots. The Hall of Fame voting is coming up soon, so we'll get into that right after the break. You don't want to miss it. Stay tuned.
Hi, I'm Michael Calamari, reminding you to tune into New York's longest-running sports call-in show, One-on-One. Catch all the breaking sports news, hot takes, inside scoops from our beat reporters, and interviews with people around the world of sports. One-on-One airs every Saturday from 11 a.m. to 2 p.m. on YouTube Live, and once again at night from 11 p.m. to 2 a.m. on 90.7 FM. Want more One-on-One? Catch our Wednesday edition of the show, One-on-One nightly from 8:30 p.m. to 10 p.m. on Twitter and YouTube Live. Join the conversation and tune in to One-on-One, New York's longest-running sports call-in show.
Welcome back to One-on-One, New York's longest-running sports call-in show. Brian Rabacs, Danny Scott, Gokul Perugu on headlines. And Danny, we got to get into some interesting discussion before the show ends. I mean, it's about that time of year. We mentioned the MLB lockout has really put a standstill on a lot of baseball discussion, but we do have the MLB Hall of Fame voting in a couple of weeks. So I think it'll be really intriguing for us to kind of go through all of these, potential Hall of Famers and discuss who's getting in, who's not. I mean, I think this is really, there's a lot of debate to be had here, especially given this year. I don't know how you feel, but this is the last year for a lot of significant players on the ballot. So let's get into it. What do you say?
Yeah, absolutely. Let's hop right into it. I don't even want to talk. Let's just get into it. This is a fun conversation to have.
So this is, I think, one of the most intriguing Hall of Fame voting classes in recent memory, because the big thing about it is that, it's been a prolonged debate for years and years and years about, the steroid users. Should they get into the Hall of Fame? Well, should they not because of their steroid use? All that can be said right now is that the four primary suspects that are still on the ballot, so that would be Barry Bonds, Kurt Schilling, Roger Clemens, Sammy Sosa. This is all their 10th year on the ballot. So if they don't get 75% of the vote this year, they're done. They're off the ballot, and they're not going to get voted into the Hall of Fame by these means. So, Danny, I guess the question I got to just open up with is, I mean, what's your take on steroid users and the Hall of Fame? Do steroid users belong in the Hall of Fame, or do you think otherwise?
So we kind of talked about it a little bit pre-show, and I saw this on YouTube. I was doing some prep for this, and they mentioned a steroid tax. So if you use steroids, there needs to be something that, like, you have to be one of the greatest players of all time. And I think two of those, and Barry Bonds and Roger Clemens, have very easily proven that they are two of, if not the two best players of all time. Barry Bonds for hitters and Roger Clemens for pitching. Roger Clemens, 7 Cy Youngs. Barry Bonds, a number of MVPs, leads the league, or leads all-time home run records, most walks of all time, most feared hitter to ever step in a batter's box. So I think it's a large question, and I do think there's two different types of steroid users. In Barry Bonds' era, it wasn't necessarily like a big deal. Because everyone was using steroids. I mean, that entire time, Mark McGwire and Jose Canseco, that whole Bash Brothers and all that. Sammy Sosa was documented using steroids. I don't think Sosa's going to get in. He doesn't have enough percentage of the votes right now, and he honestly doesn't have the numbers for a steroid user to get in. But before that, it was kind of the wild, wild west. And then you look at a couple first-year ballot guys. I know you love A-Rod as a Yankees fan. I think A-Rod has become a very, very good face for baseball at this point. But he knew, and it was very, very obvious that was a no-no at the time that he was popped. So I think there's a different question. I think probably about pre-2010-ish, that range, or even before that, probably pre-2005, when steroids became a really big deal. I think there's potential that, if you were one of these all-time greats, one of the best players of all time, I think you deserve to be in. After that, it becomes a little trickier because it was very, very clear that steroids were a no-no.
Yeah, well, I want to ask those listening, I just want to ask one question that I think is the biggest argument for, yes, steroid users have a place in the Hall of Fame. So that whole time period was dubbed the steroid era. So everyone was doing it. And the commissioner, let's be honest, the league was doing nothing to stop it at the time. They didn't care. It was enhancing their product. They were almost all for it. So let me just ask, what difference does the steroid era have with what pitchers did with Spider Tack this past year? Almost nothing. There was sure some competitive advantage gained, but at the same time with the Spider Tack stuff, the league was cracking down on nobody, and there was no signs of it being, something that should be frowned upon. Everyone was doing it. So everyone just continued to do it, and the league allowed it to happen. And that's what happened with steroids. So when you have guys like Barry Bonds who used it, you have to remember it was a different time period. And obviously the outlook on steroids now is very different from what it was in the early 2000s. But I think with the steroid guys in the Hall of Fame, I think people are just kind of rewriting history and, rewriting how steroids have always been used, because it hasn't always been a cardinal sin. I mean, steroids were accepted at one point in baseball. And I don't think guys like Barry Bonds or Roger Clemens, I personally don't think they should be kept out of the Hall of Fame because of that.
Couldn't agree with you more. You took the words out of my mouth. Another guy that you had mentioned, Kurt Schilling, I think at this point, I honestly can't see him getting in at this point after his comments about the writers and all his political stuff. The character clause is just going to keep him out until he gets to the Veterans Committee, where he is probably going to end up in the Hall of Fame at some point. However, I do not think on the final year of his ballot that he is going to be getting in this year.
Yeah, especially with all the drama that happened last year of Kurt Schilling not getting in. Now, we're not doubting Kurt Schilling's resume at all. He has all the accomplishments and accolades to get into the Hall of Fame. But I mean, I'm so sick of the character clause and, passing that standard. It's the same thing with the Aaron Rodgers thing. Like, why does it matter that Kurt Schilling, Kurt Schilling, you can say bad guy, bad person, don't agree with his beliefs at all. You can say that, but the Kurt Schilling, the player, is one of the best pitchers to ever live. So he's up there with some of the best pitchers ever. So to keep him out of the Hall of Fame because you don't like him and you don't agree with what he stands for, I mean, sure, that's fair. It's fair to not agree with what he believes in, but to keep him out of the Hall of Fame because of that, I just don't get that at all. I think Kurt Schilling should be in the Hall of Fame. But again, the idea of should they be and will they be is something entirely different.
Yeah, I agree with you. And I think that comes full circle to the steroid users as well. Maybe you didn't agree with what they did and maybe it's frowned upon. However, it was at a time where it was pretty much widely accepted. And with Kurt Schilling, you may not agree with everything he does, but he is one of the greatest pitchers of all time. He helped a couple teams win a couple World Series. So it sucks for Kurt Schilling, but I think at this point, he's just looking forward to being done with this whole Hall of Fame process.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. But we mentioned all of these, 10th year guys that could get in and, it's their last year on the ballot. So it's significant. But there's also a handful of first year players on the ballot. The two most notable names coming out of this are obviously Big Papi. These two guys are definitely out of this, list of guys.
Them get in this year. They're both not first ballot Hall of Famers. But I definitely see both of them getting in at some point. And one player that I just want to bring up that's not getting a lot of talk right now is Jake Peavy. He won a Cy Young. He's been a couple-time All-Star. He has a career ERA in the low threes. I think he is very, very deserving of being a Hall of Famer at some point. I think it's going to be a number of years before he gets in, but he is such an underrated pitcher that did a lot for the game. He was 15 years, didn't make many waves in the MLB. So that's another player that I think is close to that A-Rod David Ortiz caliber of being up there ready to get into the Hall of Fame.
I have to say, Danny, I didn't expect that at all. I saw Jake Peavy and I was like, oh yeah, it was great during his time, but kind of just wrote him off. But that's interesting to make a case for him. I mean, look at the numbers. Yeah, Jake Peavy had a great career, but I think the biggest thing with a lot of the guys on the ballot, are they Hall of Fame or are they, as we kind of discussed before the show, a Hall of very good? And I feel like Jake Peavy kind of lands in that category.
I don't know, man. Winning a triple crown pitching, I think he led the league in ERA, strikeouts, and I forget the other stat. What is it? WHIP?
I'll go through it right now if I can find it. So it's ERA, strikeouts, and WHIP.
Yep. Yeah, he led, won the Triple Crown pitching, won the Cy Young that year, multi-time All-Star. 15-year career. He has the longevity. He has the stats. And he's well-liked in the world of baseball. Another guy that I personally love that won't ever get in is Tim Lincecum. I just want to shout him out. 2-time Cy Young Award winner, won a couple World Series in San Francisco. But like you mentioned, Hall of very good player, but I think Jake Peavy is a step ahead of Lincecum.
Yeah, I agree too. I mean, Jake Peavy pitched a number of seasons. His career is 15 years. So he has the longevity, but I just don't know if like some of these seasons, he had some rough seasons. I mean, the early portions of his career, he was phenomenal. But I'm looking at these ERAs. I mean, 4.63, almost a 5 in 2011. And then, after he left San Diego, a lot of his career, his ERAs, they were just ranging over 4. So he kind of dipped off a little bit. But that's the thing with a lot of these first timers. They were great at the height of their careers, and then time goes on, they kind of sour a little bit, and that kind of hurts their resume. I mean, with a guy like Prince Fielder was great when he played, but was it for a long enough time of greatness? Probably not. Ryan Howard was the best player in baseball for the time that he was at his peak, but is he Hall of Fame worthy? Was he great for a long enough time? Probably not. He only played a certain number of years. So that's the tough thing. Baseball's Hall of Fame is the toughest Hall of Fame by far to get into. With football, you can get in. I mean, Calvin Johnson didn't play a long time, and he got in no problem. It was easy decision there. Whereas this, I mean, if you only play like 12 seasons, you're probably not getting into the Hall of Fame unless it was one of the greatest 12 seasons ever. So with all this being said, we're nearing the end of the show. So Danny, if you're a voter, which of these guys would you put into the Hall of Fame this season or on this ballot?
So we talked about this before. My 10 picks. I think it's fairly obvious that I'm going to be picking Bonds and Clemens. I add in Scott Rowland, Billy Wagner, Todd Helton. I am voting for Ortiz and A-Rod. Add Andrew Jones in there, Jake Peavy, and then I got to throw some love to one of my Giants. He's probably won't get in, but I think he's deserving of it, and Jeff Kent. Those are my 10 that I would vote for. I think they're all deserving. A couple of interesting ones. I think the 3 of the biggest question marks right now are Wagner, Helton, and Jones. Wagner, one of the best closers ever. But the real question is how do you value closers now that Rivera is done? Because Rivera kind of is the gold standard for closers. Not many closers, not many relievers are in the Hall of Fame. So how do you value that? Todd Helton, the Coors inflation hurt his chances. And then with Andrew Jones, arguably the greatest defensive outfielder of all time. And then you add over 400 home runs to his career. So I think he's absolutely deserving and will eventually get in.
Yeah. So the way I'm going to go about this, I'm getting in 5 steroid guys immediately. Barry Bonds, Curt Schilling, Roger Clemens, A-Rod, and David Ortiz. I mean, I think the whole thing about, he should get in, but he shouldn't get in first ballot is kind of tedious. Like if he's a Hall of Famer, he's a Hall of Famer, put him in. I still resent the one guy who didn't vote for Derek Jeter because he didn't feel like he deserved to be in first ballot or unanimous, whatever it was. So I got those 5. I agree with Todd Helton. I think Todd Helton, it's surprising that he's not getting a number of votes considering he played for so long and played so well, but it's the Coors Field bias. That's also an issue. Scott Rowland, I'm going to roll with Andrew Jones. And then for the sake of it, just being a Yankees guy, I'm going to go with Andy Pettitte and Mark Teixeira on the ballot. Mark Teixeira, 400 home runs, and I loved watching him play growing up. So that's the take I'm going to give. But I mean, what remains to be seen. I think these like steroid guys, they should get in, but the question is, are they going to? And the way I'm leaning is probably not. I think David Ortiz will definitely get in, but in terms of Bonds, I don't think so. Clemens probably not. A-Rod, I would love for A-Rod to get in, but I think you're being a little generous with the, total 180. There are people who still hate A-Rod, and some of the things he did in his heyday were questionable. And I think with all the steroid controversy, he's not going to get in, but that'll remain to be seen with the Hall of Fame voting coming up in baseball. And that will do it. We're running out of time. That's all we have for this episode of One-on-One. We thank you all for listening to this great show. The sports director of WFUV is Bobby Chaffardini. A huge shout out to our producer, Alex Wolves, for being with us. And a huge shout out to Gokul Perugu for being on headlines as well. Once again, you can catch this episode of One-on-One tonight on 90.7 FM from 11 p.m. to 2 a.m. And you can check out clips on this episode on our YouTube channel, as well as all episodes of One-on-One on demand. So, from Gokul Perugu and Danny Scott, I'm Brian Rabacs. Thank you so much for listening to One-on-One. a production of WFUV Sports.